One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to in all of the darkness turn it into a big pile of steaming shit. I'm joshing. This book is actually better than what I'm giving it. Hey there, everyone. The name's Adam, and I have very strong opinions about the book we're going to cover today.
And I'm Imsit, and just like a wizard, we always arrive on time.
No, we're never late or early. We're precisely when we need to be. And if you can't tell, the book that we are definitely going to be covering today is a good little book called The One Ring RPG. We are not covering second edition, though. Second edition is currently in the rights of Free League Publishing. No, we're going to the first age of this book, because technically that's the second age. We're going
Yeah,
with the Cubicle 7 copy, because originally the rights belonged to Cubicle 7. So, as for what happened, basically, I think what happened was Christopher Tolkien died. And when he died, they changed completely how they reworked the rights to Lord of the Rings. Because the moment they had issues getting second edition out, they just dropped it like a hot potato. They're like, so long, shit child, and moved on. And Free League
well,
snatched him up.
yeah. Well, again, the rights to Lord of the Rings is complicated because Tolkien sold his books, eh, and so everything that is The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings belongs to somebody else.
Yep, so with that, let's show the original cover, because the
Like,
original cover decided to go for more of a wood print vibe, a little more wood print, a little less hyper epic digital art style, which I think is actually to its benefit.
actually, it does say in the rights, the One Ring, Middle Earth, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings characters are trademarks, registered trademarks of the Saul Zanuck Company.
Yeah, right. The rights issues got really fucky around the time Christopher Tolkien was dying. This is also the reason why the Rings of Power came about, because essentially the rights were splintering. Because fuck it, we'll just sell it off. Some of it, this is why you can actually get some really funny things. Hilariously, doing stories in Mordor are dirt cheap. Doing stories in Gondor, though, you're gonna have to pay an arm and a leg for that one, buddy. And I don't know if they have to do expansion packs for it, because Gondor's territory rose and fell depending on the era. Like, do you have to buy the rights for the Gondor of the War of the Ring, or do you buy the rights of the Gondor back when it actually owned Umbar? Because they did. That's the place where the black pirate ships are, for those who don't know. Is it the period back when they actually owned what used to be Rohan? Who owns the IP now? I think it's called Middle Earth and Friends, Ossel.
I guess
And the way they
I
do it is they kind of treat it like a scummy AAA publisher, where it's like, here's the base game and here's the expansion packs that you got to pay dollary dues for. But you got to be careful or we'll ruin you.
well, I'm gonna be honest. It is such a moneymaker that
Oh,
yeah,
oh,
you
it's
charge for it.
ridiculous. But the reason I'm bringing this up is one of my biggest gripes about this book is all of first edition, all of first edition, they mostly focused on the Wilderland, which is called Rovanian. That's over the Misty Mountains, but it's north of the White Mountains. That might be why Rohan was in it, maybe. That might be why Rohan is actually in it now that I think about it. But basically, that entire area is called Wilderland. But the problem is, during this time period, you had a kingdom that was actually quite active. See, Gondor went through several wars of reclamation during this time, and that is also the era of Aragorn's wild ride, as I like to call it, where he basically low-key explores the southern reaches of Middle Earth. I believe he even goes as far south, like even beyond Umbar, to learn about the mines of the Haradrim, just to get
Mm.
an idea on what they're like and why they serve Sauron. Most of the rights are with the Embracer Group under Middle Earth and Friends. Yeah, that's the title of it. So basically, that's a big problem I have with the setting is throughout all of its first edition expansion pack books and even during second, no Gondor during a period where it was actually rather active. I don't mind it in the core book, but as it got on, I was like, why is there no Gondor? They did a Rivendell as its first expansion, fair. Then they did Rohan, which makes you think they were trying to swing south. Then they, for some reason, did like a Hobbit card game thing. I don't know why.
Because I believe at the time the Hobbit movies were coming out.
No, that's why the first book was as it was. This book came out in 2014. And again, I have to raise issue with that because the second expansion pack is in Rohan, which had nothing to do whatsoever with The Hobbit.
And I really just blame the rights issues.
I don't think it can be because I think the rights issues only got bad when Christopher Tolkien died. I just think they faffed around, and then when he was getting sick and dropping dead, they lost their chance to actually do a splat book for it. Although I think it is rather damning that they were trying to do a second edition before that. Maybe they were only focusing on Rovanian, but the problem is they then go into Eriador, which, again, for those wondering, Rovanians, over the Misty Mountains eastward, up to the Lonely Mountain, and further beyond until you reach what's called the Sea of Ruin. Goes all the way down south to, I think, Rohan. Rohan's kind of a border region from there, though. It basically is up until you hit what's called the Brownlands and the southern reaches of Mirkwood, though, which is where Dol Guldur, the Hill of Sorcery, is. Eriador is west of the Misty Mountains, and it covers that entire area. That's where the Shire, that's where Arnor of Old was, which was the Northern Kingdom. That's where I believe there's an area called the Minhiriath and the Enedwaith, which used to be forests but were chopped down by Numenor was. That's kind of that area. And it goes up to what's called the I think it's called the Andrast Peninsula. I think it's called Andrast. I don't remember. But yeah, the first book basically came out in 2011, which is why they did it based around the Hobbit area. And then the book was re-released as a full and complete revised edition in 2014. And it makes sense that it would cover cover this area because again, The Hobbit was wrapping up by this point. I don't have any issue with that. I have other issues, but that's just Adam griping number one. I'll get into my further gripes the further we get in. Here's some actually lovely art of Esgaroth, the lake town, as it's also called.
Oh, that's what that was.
Yep, Esgaroth, I believe, is the term that the elves used because the elves have their own language. It's called Lake Town by the men. This is where the fat, balding, I think Steve Fry played him. This is where the Master of Lake Town was a cartoon villain, and where Alfred, or as I like to call him, Greasebag McMonobrow, was like evil to the town hero, who was played by Gaston. Because yeah, Bard's actor also played Gaston in Beauty and the Beast. Also, I would say that in the Hobbit movies, he was really good. The only problems were he basically trusted a greasy liar.
Oh,
Still a
come on.
lovely two-page spread.
If they're that greasy, they must be trustworthy. I don't know how that makes sense, but let's just go with that.
So it opens with a letter from Balin, son of Fundin, to Bilbo Baggins, because among the 14 dwarves in the books, and in the movies as well, Balin was probably one of the ones closest to Bilbo. In the movies, that also goes to Bofur. But it's a lovely little letter, and it kind of gives you the exact time period that this is taking place. This is after the Battle of the Five Armies. This is during the. I believe this is actually around the time either Bard is getting old and about to die, or it is the time of his son Bane. I believe his name is Bane. Because yeah, it's Bard, then Bane, then Brand. So they go into detail. So they, with that in mind, you
They,
kind of get an idea on where we are.
yeah, they give the year as 2946, the third age.
Okay, with that in mind, that actually gets rid of most of my complaints that I whined about because this would be right before Aragorn became a chief of his people. He was still a sullen young man in Rivendell, low-key thirsting for Arwen. The
How old would
problem is
would
they
Arwen
also
have been?
cover a lot of stuff in 2960.
How old would Arwen have been?
A fuck jillion years old. She's at least a few thousand years old.
And she was hitting on a guy, what, 126th her age?
Uh, more than that. I can feel your skin crawling. And the only thing I can say is that this is blessed by this is blessed by Eru himself.
I mean, I understand the elves are eternally young and beautiful, and I guess they are. Well, they're immortal,
They are.
so I guess
They're
age
immortal,
doesn't
but they're
matter.
not unaging in the sense that eventually they do become wearisome. Basically, because of the creation of the world not being perfect because of what Morgoth did, they do essentially slowly get tired of existence, and they do eventually fade to nothing.
Hey, listen, Morgoth did nothing wrong. Why couldn't he create his own song? Why did he have to listen to um, of was it Aru or I'm
To
blanking
Eru,
on
his creator.
yeah, Eru's show tunes.
Well, I mean
Why
that's not
why
the issue.
couldn't he have black metal?
The issue is he also thought he could do better. Like, yeah, that's the other thing people forget about.
I mean, he didn't give him the chance,
He did. That's what the Discord was.
and Anu didn't. Eru didn't help him.
He made a second song that essentially tried to counter it first. He then made the Discord even louder, and then Eru actually worked the Discord into his third tune. It's actually due to Morgoth that things like snow and lava exists.
Those are bad things.
No, no, like it's to describe how everything, even the crazy shit that Morgoth does, is part of Eru's plan to make a more beautiful and vivid world. Anyway, yeah. So the first book establishes this as taking place 5 years after the Battle of the Five Armies, which does suck away at my initial complaints. The problem is they then kind of go further into it, which is why I have issues. Like, there is a time they actually have an adventure splat that takes place in Mirkwood over the course of 30 years, and that
Hmm,
kind of is why I'm still bringing up the whole Gondor thing.
interesting.
But yeah, it's 5 years after the Battle of the Five Army. Dane has been king for just a few years. Trade routes are being reestablished. Lake Town is being rebuilt. Dale has been rebuilt, at least partially. And things are going pretty good, especially since orcs are on the decline for a while at this point in the north. And during this time, you take part of the Heroes of Middle Earth, which is why no one has ever heard of you, and no one will write tales of your songs. So let's see, the introduction. Where to start? This volume contains all of the information players need to know to get started. Fair enough. They explain what a role playing game. Fair enough. They give you an example of play,
Yep,
which
with
is
the
done in a
lore
script, but it
master.
works.
You are a lore master.
You got to pretend that you're too good for the word game master.
Oh, and I do like this note on gender. All references to players and lore masters use the masculine pronoun for ease of expression. This should not be interpreted as excluding female players, characters, or lore masters. Although Middle Earth in the Third Age is not a place where women often choose a life of adventure, Tolkien's books introduce some memorable exceptions, providing ample inspiration to players who want to play as female heroes.
Yeah, because this is the thing that you have to keep in mind. The first edition of this book was made in the before times,
In the long lost age of 2011,
2011, and then the complete edition, which is, I believe, this is the one we're looking at in 2014.
before the Gate of Gamers,
Yeah.
before the death of Harambe.
Now, again, that is a point that they do make. If you do want to play a female adventurer, they do definitely exist. Particularly if I recall among the Northmen, because of the history of shield maidens. Like the Rohirrim were known for it. Their relatives in the north were pretty well known for this.
Or I'm gonna be honest, who gives a shit?
Yeah, who gives a shit? It's fine. It's
Listen,
for your adventure,
I want to see female dwarves. I
you
want
do,
to
and
see
you
the
can play one.
beards.
You can play one with their full beards and have people think that you're just another male dwarf, because that's
Do they
often
actually
what they do. They often try to disguise themselves as male. That is a very common thing, because basically any non-dwarf would not know, which is why it leads to the legend of them springing and being made out of rock. The god of
so
Middle Earth. This is gonna be the sickest mixtape ever. Yeah, in the world of Lord of the Rings, song is usually kind of how they actually cast magic. Like it's called music. It's all done in creation. Art itself is a form of magic.
So wait, so the celestial choir's right?
Yeah. So as for the setting, again,
Actually, wait, that gives me an interesting idea. Lord of the Rings rock opera.
there is the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins, sung by Leonard Nimoy, if I recall.
I'm just saying you express the entire Lord of the Rings saga in song.
You totally could. You genuinely could, and I think Tolkien, while he would probably have hated it since it's a corruption of his work, he might also find it amusing. He was very particular. Like even the tiniest changes usually got him pissed off.
Yeah, he probably wouldn't have liked the movies, but
Oh no, and even his son fucking hated them.
I'm sorry. First of all, you're dead, and how else are we going to see the charge of the Rohirrim?
No, it's other changes that were made. In
Oh,
particular, I believe he was rather scathing of how they handled Denethor and Boromir. Because in the theatrical cut, Boromir's all of the signs that showed him as a greater person than he actually was were cut, so he just kind of looked like the Weasley guy going, "Can I touch your ring, Frodo?" And
I
Denethor, like in the movies, he's a complete asshole. In the books, he genuinely wasn't. He was actually a really good steward. What the problem was is that it's stressful as hell. Like the job is stressful as hell. He's trying to win a losing battle against Sauron. And on top of that, the reason he hates Faramir is actually perfectly explained in the book. He hated Faramir because Faramir's birth was difficult and took his wife from him. And he reminds him too much of his wife.
gonna be that probably is a little
Faramir is
shitty.
too close to acting like his mother.
You look like the woman that gave birth to you but died, so I'm gonna take it out on you.
Where do you think George R. R. Martin took it out, got the Tyrion angle from?
Oh yeah, you're right.
Gotta keep that in mind.
So the location in this is the Wilderland,
Also known as Rovanian, as I like to call it.
which is the land extending from the Misty Mountains to the running river.
Yep. It's also
Uh,
known as the Kelduin. In the Hobbit movies, they infamously screwed it up by calling it the Anduin, which is the great river that is further west.
I do like it says it once hosted a dragon's lair because
Oh yeah,
that one's
Smaug is
dead.
dead. Smaug the Great and Terrible has been dead for a while.
And so you have the dwarves in the line of Durin. You've got Dale, Esgaroth. You have Mirkwood.
Yep, Mirkwood. Although they would never actually call it them themselves, the elves never called it Mirkwood. They always called it the Woodland Realm or Greenwood, if they had to describe it.
Yep, and the Baronings.
Bjarnings, in the movie, he's the big guy with covered in hair. That's like, I don't like dwarves. Here, have all these ponies so you can go away now. In
And
the
he's a skin
books,
changer.
they play a little bit more with that, and he was actually a lot more not friendly initially, but they showed more of his positive traits. Also, if you're wondering why Gandalf kept doing trickster shit, it's because he was kind of played up as Odin originally in the books. He was supposed to be kind of like that Odin figure that provides a little bit of mischievous aid. That's why in the books he had the dwarves slowly come in so that they would interrupt the story of how they got to Bjorn's house, so that he would get more interested in the story. Because it's like, I don't care, tell me more.
So in the year 2946,
This
5
is
years ago,
a very eventful time in Middle Earth.
you have the Battle of the Five Armies.
Which, if you're wondering, the five armies were actually elves, men, dwarves, orcs, and wargs, because wargs are intelligent.
I actually didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't know that? So, fun fact: wargs actually can speak their own language. They are intelligent, and they are malevolent spirits that essentially take the form of wolves. They tend to
Hmm.
lead large packs of them and ally with orcs. They are the lesser remnants of the original werewolves of the First Age.
And so we have the Free Folk. We have the Bardings,
Yep.
which is from the Bard the Bowman, of the line of Girion, the Slayer of the Dragon, Shooter of the Black Arrow,
These
who's
are
now
the
King of
people
Dale.
who basically, after the incident where Smaug destroyed half of Lake Town, these are the ones who decided to join him in reclaiming Dale.
I do also have to wonder. So he's a king of essentially a town. Is that
Yep.
kind of small for a king title?
He actually, I believe the term kingdom wasn't really a thing initially. I think he was just, I think his grandfather was just like his great grandfather Girion was just Lord of Dale. He wasn't a
Yeah,
king. He was just a lord.
wait, he doesn't have vassals, so yeah.
Technically, he does in the form of Lake Town. The master is
Oh,
supposed to be subordinate to him in the aftermath. Just because
but,
Dale basically has complete control over trade of dwarven goods. Basically, that gives them a shitload of economic power. Also, on
so
top of that, they serve as the middlemen between the elves of Mirkwood and the dwarves, which in the movies they actually really hyper emphasize the issues between elves and dwarves. But funnily enough, that's actually not as big of an issue in the books. It really just depended on which elves you talked to. The elves of Rivendell fucking love dwarves, and the Noldor in general liked dwarves. Noldor being the high elves of the West. They tended to get along pretty well. The Wood
and then
Elves,
that
on the other hand, don't, and that has a lot to do with what's called the War of the Silmarils. And actually, The Hobbit is essentially a childish retelling of that story. The
hmm,
Arkenstone is a lesser version of the Silmaril. King Thranduil is a lesser version of King Thingol. And the dwarves' enmity with them is a bit of a nod to the dwarves of Belagost and Nogrod. Basically, if you're wondering why Wood Elves hate them, essentially King Thingol gets his hand on a Silmaril because his daughter he set his daughter up with a guy named Baron. Baron's like, hey, can I marry your daughter? Thingol's like, sure, if you can get a Silmaril, motherfucker. You have to go to Morgoth and rip it from his fucking crown. The mad lad did it. Lost a hand, but he fucking did it. So he reluctantly gives his daughter to him and basically goes, I want this to be part of some bitching jewelry. So he hires dwarves to make the necklace for him. The dwarves come in, they eye the Silmaril, go, that's some really lovely shit because dwarves really love gold. That's one of their biggest weaknesses. And then you get a bit of a he said, she said story because among the dwarves, they blame Thingol for trying to rip them off, basically refusing to pay for their jewelry. And the
so wait,
dwarves killed him because he didn't pay them as basically recompense.
so this does mean the dwarves are Jewish.
Among the elves, the dwarves saw the sight of the Silmarils, became completely obsessed with collecting it, demanded it. Thingol said no, and they killed him. And that is why wood elves and dwarves usually hated each other because of what happened. And Thranduil was actually alive during that time. He was a lesser scribe or nobleman, if I recall, in the kingdom. He saw him get killed. That's why he doesn't like dwarves all that much. Just to give some context on that.
Ah,
But yeah, Bardings are those who followed Bard. There is an expansion pack that actually allows you to play as a man of the lake, and their benefits I believe are more mercantile based. Since Lakemen also make a killing with trade with basically the men of the lake and Dale both make a killing on trade. Lakemen actually get wine from Dorwinion, which are grown by elves, and sell it elsewhere. By the way, elf wine absolutely will destroy you. It is such high alcohol content, it will knock your ass out or kill you.
how much of a percentage?
Fuck zillion. It's so strong it can make even elves get drunk and fall asleep, and elves can drink dwarves casually under the table. That's why Legolas was able to do that to Gimli.
Ah,
Yeah, it takes a lot to get an elf tipsy.
so that means how excellent is their liver?
Godlike. Anyway, I'm sorry about that tangent. Bjornings, these are people who essentially are kin to Bjorn. You don't really see any of them, but it's
Are they
hinted
also
that
are they also skin changers?
some of them are. There's a few of them that are, but they have to be specifically from his clan. Most of the time, they're actually a mixture of that and woodsmen. Woodsmen being people that are crazy enough to actually try harvesting wood from Mirkwood. You know, the area filled with toxic trees and killer spiders.
Oh, that's just the average day in the Empire.
But yeah, essentially, because this is inspired by the movie, I would actually be laughing pretty hard if they got the rights to the Warner Brothers purchase. I don't know how
It
they
didn't
pulled
say
that
that.
off.
It didn't say that the rights were from Warner Brothers. So now,
Okay, so it's just from the. So they describe him as a lonely guy, but essentially he does eventually rebuild his tribe, essentially, because his people used to actually live in the Misty Mountains, at least until the orcs came.
yeah.
And
So we got,
as for where they live along the River Anduin. They live basically where Bjorn's house is, and a little bit more.
and then we have the dwarves, um, where they are living in, believe, Dane. Dane is ruling them,
The current king is Dane Ironfoot. Funnily enough, Dane and Thorin were such good buddies that Dane named his son after him. Not even kidding.
and
After Dane is Thorin the Third Stonehelm, and actually his son is the prophesied seventh and last Durin. Because the dwarves have a cosmology belief that Durin was the greatest of their line, at least among the folk of Durin, and that he would reincarnate 7 times, being one of the few that were able to do this. And upon the 7th, that would be the death knell of the dwarves.
who is the seventh?
Dane's grandson. He
Who
actually
is?
reclaims Moria.
Oh,
He's just called Durin the Seventh.
oh,
He's the
makes sense.
seventh Durin. He's the last Durin.
And then the next we have the elves of Mirkwood.
Yep. You can play as them. By the way, fun fact: in the Rivendell expansion pack, Rangers are actually considered an advanced class. While you can be a multi-millennial age elf and not have that problem. Yes, I'm not fucking with you. An elf that has been alive for 1,000 years is considered an average class compared to some guy who is like the longtime great 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 grandson of some schmuck who is a functionary in Arnor.
Well, they don't have the blood of Numenor in them.
Like, I can understand making a high elf because that's the other playable advanced class thing. But I can understand doing that because they legitimately saw the light of Aman. They saw the light of the two trees.
Also, here's the thing: what does a wood elf do besides just live in the woods and shit in it? What have they been doing?
They tend to enjoy watching stars, holding feasts, hunting deer.
Exactly. A ranger has been busy killing orcs.
Oh no, they kill spiders and orcs all the time too. Like they just try to live their lives as the hunter gatherers essentially. They also are pretty well known for loving jewelry.
And no expansion, no industry, no advanced
Some of
economics,
that is just genuinely due to their population collapse. Yeah, a lot of wood elves died in the war against Sauron.
and they couldn't
I'm not even
recruit.
kidding. During the last alliance of men and elves in the movie, they don't show you, but low key, the wood elves actually got massacred. Thranduil saw his father get violently killed by Sauron, who basically cooked him alive with his fire powers. Because yeah, that's the thing. Sauron in the movies, he's all big and scary and spiky. No, Sauron in the books, he is described as being like made out of coal. He's constantly burning at a high intensity because originally he was an angel of the craftsman god. He literally his touch literally burned.
But the wood elves couldn't institute some policy like happened in Paraguay after what 9/10 of their male population got decimated
They
or not
fucking tried.
annihilated.
They fucking tried. They still
Their fer-
declined.
their fertility was that bad.
Some of it's due to elven culture where basically it's not a good idea to bring kids into a hellscape. A lot of it's just so many of them fucking died. that quite a few of them said, you know what, screw this, let's just go to the ocean and go west.
All right. Well, next up is the hobbits,
So this is one of those ones that I actually went, why the fuck did you include them?
because listen, they're one of the main races in the story.
They are, but oh, I'm just envisioning Bilbo legitimately being forcibly institutionalized after the third Hobbit child decides to go on an adventure east.
They just come back as just a shell-shocked veteran.
Oh well, because this system has an insanity bar. They come back as a deranged war criminal, saying, "And I'd fucking kill them again."
Then start writing a fantasy series about a fantasy series about some sort of pagan realm full of different gods and deities fighting each other over a series of cycles.
Look, I'm sorry, Bilbo, but we gotta commit you. After Owen Proudfoot went to the east, he came back and he started advocating killing all big folk, and I don't know why.
The orcs, it shot me like a diamond arrow,
he
and I,
he
I, I
screams as he's waving a hand that's been mutilated. There's scars all over him.
these were not killers, these were men.
Look, I get it. I get it. You're
You know,
trying to profit off of the Hobbit, but what the
well,
fuck?
he takes a company of hobbits and they're out in Mordor just fighting.
No. Also, by the way, Squirrel Killer, you're incorrect. Hobbits have done one more thing. Uh, during a harder series of years, there were goblins that organized around Mount Graham under the great King Gulfimbul. The hobbits basically teamed up with the rangers to take him out, and legitimately that is how the game of golf was invented, because the leader of the hobbits, Thane, what was his name, Thane, uh, Bullroarer Took, was large enough to ride on a pony, on a horse if I recall, and essentially uppercutted the dude with some type of weapon or something like a hammer, and the impact from it knocked the Goblin King's head off and landed into a gopher hole. That's how golf was invented.
Hmm. But
Also in the original books, I believe they actually had policemen and telephone boxes. I don't remember if they
I'm
had
sorry,
those.
what?
Oh yeah, the original copy of the book had some interesting changes.
So it was a steampunk setting?
No, because it was supposed to just be a fantasy book. He then rewrote it a bit to be closer to the Lord of the Rings. It wasn't even
Um,
tied to Lord of the Rings originally.
yeah. Well,
In fact,
next up,
actually, the
though,
original Riddle game, Gollum was like, "Oh shit, I lost. Here you go, friend. This ring will help you." Well, actually, he didn't give him the ring. He was gonna, and then he was like, "Oh shit, I couldn't find it." Yeah, the book was very different.
yeah. Then there's the Woodmen of Wilderland.
So they mention them a few times in the book. Basically, this is the reason the eagles don't really leave their mountains too often. Because when they're going out hunting and they try to get an animal, these guys will shoot arrows at them.
You know, they're simple, hardy folk, the common clay of the West. You know, morons.
They're also maniacs because these people are like, they look at the dark, twisted woods filled with dead, stagnant air, the chittering of spiders, the cackling of orcs, and they're like,
I
yeah.
gotta live there.
Not only I gotta live there, they go, nah, I'd win.
I got me this trusty axe, and that's it.
They're pretty nutty. Also, they are apparently friends with Radagast the Brown. They're only bringing up Radagast because he does actually live around there. Yeah,
Now
they
that explains that.
well, also, here's the other thing. It's because he's in the movies where they made him a Harry Potter character, basically.
Is Radagast isn't even a wizard.
Not a chuckle at the Blazing Saddles reference.
Or
What the fuck, man? My brain is broken. I'm sorry, man.
all right, but then next up is the Shadow.
which actually it won't lead into my complaints. That's later in the book, but yeah, the Shadow,
Which
aka the forces that are tied to the Discord of Melkor, which are in this age basically servants of Sauron, or their own independent evil agents.
and we have the regions. We actually have a nice map then after. It is sideways though.
It's a shame. Basically, you're supposed to tilt your head. And actually, this is a redrawing. This is actually a redrawing, because there's a class. This is a redrawing of a classic map system. My guess is so they can keep the rights to it.
Presumably. But then we have how to play. I think we all know how to play a role-playing game.
How do we play? I don't know, man. We might not. Here's why. The structure of the game. I don't like how they explain the mechanics of this. To facilitate this creative interaction, each adventure is structured into two phases: an adventuring phase, usually taking the largest part of the gameplay, and a closing fellowship phase. There's something about how they describe this that I hate.
So the adventuring phase is start with one or more challenges the players react to, and leads to different directions, leading to the conclusion of the adventure. The fellowship, it's downtime. It's their rest. It's what they do from returning to the adventure.
I hate when they
It
try to video gamify an RPG book. Do you think this is, you said, because you mentioned that Cubicle 7 also did the Age of Sigmar stuff, do you think this is like an element of that because of how phases work in that game?
I I need to look it up, but I don't think they had this adventuring phase. The other thing, from what I gather, is the Age of Sigmar one was a lot more combat focused. Because I mean, you're essentially playing very powerful characters right off the bat. So
By the way,
I think it's a little bit different.
you like how they have a note? Structure and the experienced gamer. The game structure presented here is a tool to help the lore master. Experienced gamers might find it artificial or intrusive, but the same structure is present in most role-playing games. It just isn't referred to as explicitly. Look, I'm sorry that you think people are too mentally deficient to understand how a game works, but I don't know. I feel like this is a cope to try to explain why they had to describe this. I
It
feel
does seem
I
to me
feel like this is stupid.
that the Fellowship is mechanically playing out what sort of a level up or a pause would be.
Oh, that's stupid.
Well, let's see what
It's
it
literally
does.
it's literally just downtime. Just call it downtime. I don't like I don't like that they had to add an entire section basically trying to justify their decision making here. I like that just feels kind of pathetic.
I guess the other thing is,
By the way, again, keep in mind that I am biased heavily against this book. Just, just keep that in mind. I'm being
I
very honest about this.
I think the other thing may be due to the fact that, as it says, the one evening spent playing the One Ring may detail a single day or be over a year.
It can. It just depends if you want to do long form adventures, which you can do. I feel like that's a little bit strange, but you do have to keep a factor in travel time because that is something that Tolkien is pretty damn good about. Like, this actually is an issue in, for example, the Hobbit movies. In the Battle of the Five Armies, how the hell did Dane get there in less than a day?
A wizard did it. It was one of the blue wizards.
But by the way, in the books they actually go are rather impressed because I think he was able to make what was supposed to be, I think, a little bit over a week's time in 6 days. Like that actually surprised the elves because it's like, holy shit, they actually got here quicker than we thought. So usually a
Well,
full
yeah,
adventure should not take more than 2 or 3 sessions of play to complete, with the adventuring phase taking up most of the game time and fellowship occurring in the last half evening or so of play. I think the problem is they're trying to codify a structure when, in my experience, the way tabletop games go are they're organic.
I feel like we
They
have to
never
see.
follow the plan that you think you have.
We should probably see what the Fellowship stage
I kind
is.
of low key like this is kind of low key the same reasons why Sauron decided to try to rule the world. I'm not even kidding. If you want to know why Sauron turned evil, it's because he actually got kind of pissy that life wasn't perfect. Because he saw the perfect beauty of the completed picture, and then when he went down, he forgot enough of it. So he was always pissed off, like, why isn't it like this? I
So
can
we
make
got
this
in.
better.
So he was. So if we say Melkor is a metalhead,
Melkor
Sar.
is destruction. He was just spite. He was basically just spiteful that he couldn't create anything on his own, so he wanted to tear it down.
So he's G.G. Allen.
Sauron, on the other hand, he likes that there's an existence of this sort. He just thinks that he can run it better as the eternal God King.
Because obviously I know how to do things better than the guy who is actually all-knowing. That makes sense.
Hobbits are there because, well, who else is going to be the audience player surrogate? Elves, dwarves, and humans? Pshaw, don't be ridiculous. I don't know.
I
I think you could
mean,
do it. I think it could be really interesting to play an elf that's never left the Greenwood.
actually, the hobbits technically are the surrogate.
Well, they were because Bilbo was the person who had no clue what the hell any of this was.
But looking at the character sheet, this is why I say it has the same thing as Age of Sigmar, because I recognize the three attributes. It just that it has three attributes.
Yep, there
Usually
are
it's
three
like a
major attributes which are split how you split your skills.
physical, mental, and like maybe a spiritual one.
Body is your physical, wits are your mental, heart is your spiritual, and I believe that actually helps determine your sanity because that's the thing you have to worry about is your sanity. Which do they actually have the sanity on this sheet?
Which means now I would love a crossover between this and Cthulhu.
Call of Cthulhu, where you make no Lord of the Rings, where you make Sauron and all angelic beings like Eldritchian would be fun.
Well, no, you have the the dwellers below.
Oh yeah, the things that gnaw the bone of the earth, the primordial elements that basically are only known about by Eru and those who dig too deep. They're known as the nameless things.
Yeah, dwarven adventurers fighting off Cthulhu mythos.
That actually sounds really fun. I actually think that is an adventure in that's one of the adventure splats they have for Moria. Not in this book, but in like one of the other books, in Middle Earth Roleplaying. I believe that's an actual splat you can do. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to find because there is a sanity modifier and shadow corruption.
I think it probably is explained further on because they
Yeah,
then
because
explain various
that is something I
categories.
am going to be very very harsh on.
It might be shadow.
Probably. By the way, as for the character sheet design, it's simple. The system is relatively simple. I actually do like this. I would say this is a much more easy to get into game than Middle Earth role playing. So that's a kudos to the book. Because I am going to try to be fair in parts where I can. I don't like this book, but I have to say, good character sheet design.
But then we have next the dice,
Yep, the
and
dice system because this is a
it's
different dice system.
proprietary. It is a D12 and a D6 with the one, or no, with, I believe the 11 and the 12 having a special symbol.
Yes, they do.
11 is the Eye of Sauron, and the Gandalf rune is 12.
By the way, I
And
have Sauron instant failure. 12 Gandalf rune is an instant success traditionally. Also, their success die are proprietary since the 6 shows a Tengwar rune of that one.
that just means critical success.
Which, by the way, so yeah, you have to do proprietaries to fully remember this. Although you don't have to. If you just have a D12 and a D6, you're usually fine. So dice rolls are not always necessary. Heroes are
Wait,
supposed to be
hold
proficient
on.
enough to complete many actions without effort. I always
Is,
love when books point that out because otherwise you can run into the powered by the apocalypse example of burning down your house and then the neighborhood just trying to assemble a grilled cheese sandwich. I'm sorry, pal, but you got a 7, but you got an 8, which means you succeeded, but unfortunately, you caused a complication, so now your oven's on fire from the butter. The butter
hold on a sec.
flared over.
Is that Gandalf rune a Hebrew letter? Looks like Shin.
I believe that's a Kurth rune, which I believe that's Kurth. Although I wouldn't be surprised if they took a bit of Hebrew to inspire that, because again, the dwarves were somewhat based a little bit on the Hebrew, not quite, not quite. They're far more based on their kind of stories in the sagas of the Norse. Basically, he was inspired heavily by the Eddas.
Yeah, as well as that Tengwar rune. That it looks like Hebrew.
It's interesting because the languages that he tended to make were actually closer based on Finnish.
Hmm. But uh, so they move on to what skills and attributes are.
By the way, they also here are the die roll results on a feat die, 1 to 10. It's read normally. The Gandalf rune is a success. Is a success no matter what, and a Sauron rune counts as a 0.
So it seems when you're making a test with a skill, how many dots you have in it is how many you roll plus uh let's say the feat die.
I believe the feat die is always what you have, and then your success die are your skills. Yes.
So it's roll to see if you get success.
Yeah. Basically, the more skilled you are, feat die are less critical.
Oh
However,
yeah,
feat
no,
die can still fuck you.
the feat die because it's 1 through 10 read as normally. So I guess depending on whatever condition, whatever you need to get.
Basically, it helps in your success because you use your success die as your skills. Yeah. Gandalf rune will turn it into a success no matter what. Sauron runes, that can single-handedly fuck you because it usually results in a bad scenario happening. Now, here's the interesting twist. For any Servants of the Shadow, the Sauron rune is the winner. It counts as an auto success. Gandalf rune
I like
counts as a
that.
0.
That's neat.
That's a great touch, and there is actually a third-party fan edit that allows you to play creatures like orcs that actually use that as part of its rule system.
Oh, and I see. So you need to get the target number for your success. So add up
So,
how many.
so Scroll Killer is confused on what the system is. So the way this works is there are D12s that you use. That's your feat die. So what is a feat die? Let's go into that just briefly. So a feat die plus the number of success dice. Success dice are based on your skills. Feat die is just your general ability to maybe pull this off. Like if you have no training whatsoever, it's a combination of luck and prowess. Success die are your training. Like let's say you are a dwarf who has never really worked with a bow. You try to use a bow to, I don't know, catch a rabbit or something, catch something to eat on the adventure trails. So you draw a knock, but you don't have any training in it, so you can only use your feat die. Conversely, though, you're skilled in axes. So let's say you're fighting and fucking up orcs. You would use the feat die combined with, let's say, 2 or 3 success dice, which means you roll 1d12 always, and then the number of d6 is based on your skills. That's if I'm
And then
reading this correctly.
for your attributes, you can spend a point of hope to receive a bonus equal to that attribute score. Because what you're trying to reach with all your die rolls is a target number. So if you have the feat die and 2 points in whatever skill, that means you get 1 through 10 and 1 through 6.
By the way, if you're wondering what a TN is, that is test number. I don't know why they did that rather than DC, which means dice check. My guess is maybe to avoid proprietary issues.
And then the degree of success is determined by how many Tengwar runes you got.
As for how attributes work, you basically you burn a hope point, and you just apply the number straight. That's at least my interpretation of what I'm reading.
Yeah.
Honestly, the system is pretty solid. I would say it's a little more complicated than, say, the storyteller system or the D percentile of Call of Cthulhu. but it's honestly not too bad to get. For now, there are a couple of issues with it we'll get into later. And no, it actually doesn't have to do with the insanity modifiers. I'll get into that later.
And well,
So
next
actually,
up,
here's what the test numbers values traditionally are. A very easy a TN would be 10 because you have a D12 to play with, and usually you have at least one or two D6s. Easy is 12, 14 is moderate, 20 is called daunting. You have to beat the number that the game master, I'm not calling it lore masters, calls for. As for degrees of success, sometimes it's useful or even necessary to determine the quality of the outcome. So to determine that, you actually count how many special icons show up, basically how many sixes. If there are no icons scored at all, this action attempt is narrowly successful, which I think is kind of bullshit, at least in terms of the phrasing. If you have a 6 on any of them, it's considered great success. If 2 or more, it's an exceptional success.
and that's how I guess the game works. Next up is creating a hero.
They actually give an example here. So he uses his insight, which is 3 dice, it looks like. He gets a 6 on his feat die, and then a 6 and a 4 and 3 on a success die. A 6 plus 6 already sums up to 12, and there's still 2 more to add up. You can actually say that you've pulled off a great success because of the 6. That gives you an example of how the dice rolls work. Here we go, hero creation. And we actually covered the heroic cultures too. Because that's their term for race. Which makes sense because a lot of these are just men.
Yeah. So let's see.
The D12 is kind of your random bullshit go luck factor. And then you have D6 pulls to determine your skill. Like basically, your skill is lower than luck slash fate slash prowess. But the more dice you have, the more reliable it is. That's kind of the logic. I think it makes pretty good sense, Squirrel Killer. Again, like I said, there are good things about the One Ring book. This is one of them, actually.
I actually do like something that they bring up the use of language in game.
Yep.
So all player heroes are able to speak common speech at fluency in addition to their
Westron.
native
Yep.
language. But if you have elf lore, you get Quenya.
I'm surprised because Quenya is nowhere near as common as Sindarin.
Well, some knowledge. Folklore, character with folklore, can communicate with most folks from the free peoples. Oh, actually, no, they give them the main languages. The Bardings have Dalish.
Yep,
The
because they do
Bjorn from
have
the
their
wood.
own Northman language. It was heavily inspired by Dwarvish, actually, at least somewhat. Actually, no, it's the other way around. If you're wondering why the dwarves tend to have Norse names, it is because of their time among the Northmen. Basically, that's how they hid their true language, which is Kuzdul.
The Bearings and the Woodmen have Anduin tongue. The dwarves know Dalish, but they also know Dwarvish as a secret language.
Yep, Kuzdul is secret because they don't want it to be corrupted and permutated by men. That's why they're very quiet about speaking it in front of anyone but dwarves. Because it is the language personally taught to them by their creator, Mahal, which is their word for Aul the Smith.
And then the Elves of Mirkwood have Sindarin and Woodland Elvish.
Woodland Elvish is basically an evolution of. So here's a thing. There is a fuckload of Elvish languages, and Woodland Elvish is an evolution of, I believe, one of the many Avarin dialects. Uh, I don't know which one of it is. There's a bunch of them, like Huenti and so on. It doesn't matter. Basically, at this point in time, they mostly use Sindarin because essentially, when the Woodland realm fell, a lot of their leadership came and actually rallied them.
I thought Woodland Elvish would have been a descendant of Brush Elvish or Shrub Elvish.
No, this isn't. This is not. No, this isn't Glorantha. I almost said Galarian, which is completely wrong.
But next up, they describe the Bardings.
Also, if you're
Uh,
wondering, hobbits do only speak Western. It's not common speech. I don't know why they call it that. It's called Western. I guess it's a rights issue, which is weird because they have the rights to the Lord of the Rings, which maybe they don't have the rights to the appendices, because I think that's where they describe why it's called Western.
so description: the men are known to shave their beards completely unless they are very old. Women let their hair grow long. They have a standard of living of prosperous.
Oh yeah, because of their retrading with the dwarves, they're a lot richer than they used to be. The most prestigious ones are those that are taken on by dwarves as apprentices, because that is something that dwarves will do at times.
They have scholar and treasure hunter as their suggested callings.
Callings are basically, why did you become an adventurer? What drove you to become an adventurer? And what King Bard says, these are just like this would be the equivalent of in the World of Darkness how clans kind of talk about each other.
Yep. Like with the woodmen. As hard as it can be to recognize it, we and the woodland dwellers share a common heritage.
They do. They are descended from the House of Bayor, if I recall correctly. Basically, there are three houses of men, at least in the West. They are known as the houses of Bayor, Haleth, and Hador. Hador are the gold blonde guys that are really big. That's where the Rohirrim come from. Dark-haired men tend to be from the House of Bayor. As for the House of Haleth, they get fucked all the goddamn time, which is why quite a few of them actually joined Saruman to fuck over other people. The
Haleth,
Dunlendings are descended from the second
ah,
house.
yeah.
They're they're not very happy with their other kin.
So, the starting skills scores kind of show where their focus is. They have some in battle, but their biggest is in persuade, and they have travel, inspire, explore. They're pretty much the face of your party.
They tend to do best as the face, yes. And do they actually describe, or can you actually move the things? I don't remember.
I
I
no,
think these are just
yeah,
your starting attributes that you get.
yeah. You have specialties, but
So yeah, this is what you start with if you pick a barding.
and then you have backgrounds, which
Well, you
I guess
also get cultural blessings, which these are special things that you get because you're a barding. Stout-hearted, for example, this gives you the ability, if you make a test using Valor, you can roll the feat die twice and keep the best result. Traditionally, cultural blessings are going to be like this, where based on your culture, you usually get the ability to do a reroll.
so we have as your backgrounds by Hammer and Anvil, which is the dwarf apprentice, and that gives you your attributes and your favored skill, as well
Yep.
as distinctive features.
Word weavers are those who are skilled at poetry and riddling. Gifted senses means that you're keen-eyed.
I-
Um,
There's this one, Dragon-eyed. Your great grandfather witnessed the destruction of his father's house when the dragon raised Dale. He escaped with his life, but from that day his eyes turned the color of pale ashes. Through your grandfather and your father after him, his unrelenting gaze lives on in your ashen eyes.
that's actually something that I have to bring up in the One Ring RPG. They kind of play up dragons as almost somewhat Eldritchian. As in,
Aren't
just,
they?
well, they kind of are, but like, there's an adventure series where you actually have to go near the Withered Heath, and looking upon it can actually drive you mad. Like, there's just something intrinsically wrong with dragons.
The withered heap, I'm assuming, is a.
It's a stretch of forlorn lands in the middle of the Grey Mountains. It used to be a large valley. It still is, but it's called that because a large number of dragons used to live there.
So you're just probably seeing dragon droppings and their discarded, I don't know, crap.
Well, I mean, they also play with especially in the movies, they play with dragon fire. Basically, continuously poisons the land around it on places it's touched until the dragon is dead. So there is just something innately horrific about them. Also, fittingly enough, dragons can actually, I believe, use magic. A lot of people in Middle Earth can. It's usually through songs. It's just they're not called wizards. It's just kind of seen as something they can do.
Mm.
Hobbits, for example, are actually somewhat capable of using magic to go darn near invisible.
Well, next up is the Bjornings.
Yep, the Bjorningas.
Yep. And their starting skills, they have insight, awe, hunting as their primary skills. They have a 0 in courtesy
That's
and
because
a 0 in
they're
stealth.
completely blunt. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Like to give you an idea on the inside of their people, here are some things that they say on each of the people. Dwarves are a strange race. Some say they're cut from living rocks. Their heads are certainly hard, though. Hobbits of the Shire, stout-hearted folk, though they should be with the amount they eat.
let's see. With the various backgrounds, child of two folks, father came down from the mountains, took a wife, a woman from the tribes of Mirkwood, grew
Because
up among two
they're
worlds.
basically playing up that the woodsmen are slightly different in culture than the Bjornings. Because the woodmen, I believe, in this setting are described as having fair hair.
Mm. And then the next is the dwarves, the Lonely Mountain.
Yep, the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain. Basically, so here's the thing. Not every dwarf you run into is a member of Durin's folk, necessarily. At least by the point of the Third Age. They might be what's called a Broadbeam, and they might be what's called a Firebeard. You also might find members of the four Eastern clans among them.
And then for their skills, the highest are travel and search.
Because most of them only recently have settled down.
Yeah, you have the
Also,
far
their
trader.
cultural blessing is redoubtable. They calculate their starting fatigue threshold by adding up the encumbrance ratings of all the items they're carrying and then subtracting their favorite heart score from the total. I don't know what I just read. That feels a little clunky. I forgot that encumbrance was a thing in the system.
Yeah, they actually do say a far trader. You were only a stripling when you left your home in the Blue Mountains to follow your kinsmen along the trading roads.
Most of the dwarves that resettled Erebor are from the Blue Mountains. Yes. Essentially, what happened was that when the dragon attacked, the dwarves scattered. They couldn't go to the Grey Mountains because they actually left the Grey Mountains to return to the Lonely Mountain because they actually got into a war with dragons and fucking lost. They can't really resettle the Misty Mountains. The goblins are too thick on there. And Moria is claimed by something dark, a being of shadow and flames. Some of them escaped to the Iron Hills. That's where Dane's folk actually went. Some would ply their trade among the men of Rohan and Gondor. The White Mountains were never really settled by dwarves, not really. Most fled to the Blue Mountains, which by this time period was not in good shape. Basically, when the War of Wrath happened in the end of the First Age, when the gods actually, stepped on the earth and started throwing down with Morgoth, yeah, a good chunk of that part of the continent broke off and sunk, and that completely fucked up the Blue Mountains. So it took time, but eventually what happened was Thrain, which is Thorin's dad, was able to kind of rebuild a community there. He then tried to go actually reclaim, I believe it wasn't Moria. His grandfather tried that, and that's what led to the Dwarven Orc War, which by the way lasted 10 years. It wasn't just one fucking battle in the Hobbit movie.
Mm.
Thrain, I believe, was going to go out to Erebor, but by that point kind of went crazy and got captured by the Necromancer. And Thorin managed pretty well, but he was always thinking, well, shit, the Lonely Mountain's so much better than this garbage. That's why lonely exile is another thing you can be.
I do like with the names. There's a shit ton of them for male. There's only 4 for female.
Well, yes, because that's the other thing that the dwarves have a problem with. If I recall correctly, even in Tolkien lore, there's not many dwarven women. As in, like, their race is kind of lopsided. They tend to have more men than women. Oh, I like this little. I I think this is just supposed to be a small dwarven city. It's not. It's not Erebor. It's just a small
Hmm,
city they made.
nice.
It's
Next up,
it's
though, are
neat.
the elves of Mirkwood.
Did they actually go into details about this? A little bit, a little bit. So the elves of Mirkwood. Oh god, I'd have to go into big details about them. The main body of them are not gray elves. Gray elves are called that because they came from the forest realm of Doriath. The reason they're called that is because they are the closest of all elves to have seen the light of the trees without seeing them. In fact, only their king Eluthingle did, and that's just because he fell in love and married with an angel, a Maya. They are the
Lucky.
most refined and cultured of those elves that did not see the lights, the Moraquendi. And it's because of that they often became the ruling class among the other elves, which include the Nandor, which are those who refuse to go over the Misty Mountains. And I believe there's another batch of them that did go over the Misty Mountains, but loved the seas too much to leave. Basically, they stayed around the rivers and water. They tended to like them too much. So basically, there's a caste system in Mirkwood. The leadership tend to be gray elves. The main body of them are just straight up wood elves.
Yay, institutional race caste system.
Somewhat. Not purposefully. Basically, it's the equivalent of this guy knows what he's doing, so let's make him our king. And also, they do describe that the elves of Mirkwood are a folk at war because they kind of are. Their woodland realm is slowly falling into darkness, and they are trying their best to try to save it, and it's not working. It's not working. It's just falling apart. I have seen the downfall of many mortal kings. Bard seems of a wiser kind than most of them. But what about his subjects? Hobbits of the Shire. They seem a merry and resourceful people. Let us hope that their spirit won't be darkened now that they've seen the world outside their borders. One hobbit has. That's
Hmm.
kind of the problem with trying to make it so that a whole bunch of hobbits decide to just leave and go on adventures.
What do you mean? There was always hobbits exploring the Middle Earth.
You're joking, but actually there have been hobbits that have done that. Most of the time they're among the Tooks, which they actually have a legend about why they do this. In legend, the founding father of the Took family actually married a fairy as his wife, and that's why they're always a little bit strange in the head. And yet, despite
Oh,
that, they're among the wealthiest of the hobbits, and on top of that, tend to be the leaders. They tend to be the Thanes.
hmm. So the elf skills: athletics 3, lore 3.
Yep. The athletics are mainly just so you can surf all over things like Legolas did. God, the Hobbit movies went crazy with him. He actually was able to defy gravity in that, literally.
I mean, they're elves. Can't they do that?
No. Also, Bilbo was part Took. Yes, he is. His mother was Belladonna Took. His father was Bungo Baggins.
Okay, who names their kid Bungo?
Hobbits. These are the people who also named a kid Frederegar, and because he gained weight, like they knew he was going to be nicknamed Fatty. There's legitimately originally, I think in one and fun fact, in some of the early adventure games for Lord of the Rings, like the early computer games, you can actually have one of your Fellowship members be Fatty Bulger. He actually helps the four hobbits leave the Shire by basically pretending that he's keeping with them, like as guests for a while. He actually has a little bit of a role to play in that. He also eventually gets imprisoned by Saruman when he's the dirty old man known as Sharky, locked in prison and basically starved to death, but because he was so fat, he was able to survive. I mean, he was rail thin by the time they got him out from there, but still.
And let's see. Next up, though, is the hobbits.
Hey, the hobbits. By the way, they have a bunch. Again, each of them have their own backgrounds, which determine things that you get.
I like the unusual calling, Slayer.
Well, yeah, hobbits are not warriors by inclination. No matter what the Hobbit movies tried to do.
Oh, and I've played the Gollum game. He's clearly a fighter.
Yeah, hobbits tend to not be much in the fan of adventuring. The closest they tend to be, they tend towards is they might do a walking holiday to Bree.
They, let's see. And when a hobbit commits the unthinkable social offense of going on an adventure, he is sure to lose his good name. He starts to be
Yep,
attributed to all sorts of oddities and ends up quickly with a reputation for a queer or mad character.
yep.
Ah,
In the
so
strange sense, not in the activist sense.
what do you mean? They two men together? Clearly that means they're gay.
There's actually a common theory that Bilbo might have actually been gay because he was a lifelong bachelor. I'm not even kidding. That's an actual theory.
That or the ring just fucked him up.
Possibly, but he actually only started to get a bit battier with age. Also, he kind of did that to fuck with his relatives. I'm not even kidding. Like, some of his crazier shit he would do would just be to fuck with his relatives.
Like, joke's on you. I am pretending to be retarded.
Now, joke's on you. I'm pretending to be crazy. By the way, the kids fucking loved him. Because he would tell all sorts of crazy stories. Some of them based on his adventures. Some of them he would just make up on the fly.
Oh, so the skills for the hobbits, courtesy and stealth are 3.
Well, yeah, hobbits are notoriously polite, and they are pretty much impossible. I mean,
And
constantly Bilbo would complain of all of this dwarvish racket because hobbits are very stealthy when they want to be.
let's see. Yeah, you're right. They have Tukish blood.
Yes, they do.
Hobbit names, adventuring.
I would be very surprised if they didn't have a if they didn't mention Tookish blood.
And we got the woodman.
By the way, if you're wondering why there's so many hobbit names, Tolkien legitimately went full autismo mode and went into big details about a variety of hobbit clans and families and lineages. He's done that quite a bit. Hobbits actually just go insane quickly. That's the reason for the madness mechanic. Like the moment you leave the Shire, you just instantly start gibbering and screaming about your precious, ripping your clothes off and your hair, and just crawling on
I
all
messed up
fours.
courtesy. I did mess up courtesy.
Probably.
Dang it.
So here's the Woodmen of the Wilderland. They're claiming, I believe they're related to the Rohirrim. These guys are mad bastards. They legitimately take a look at the Shadow Encrusted Darkness and said, "Nah, I'd win."
Their skills, they have a 3 in healing and a 3 in explore.
Also, traditionally, women fighting and hunting alongside their men. Yes, they did. Basically, that's the Shield Maiden thing again. Because again, Tolkien thought about that sort of stuff quite a bit. Oh yeah, the autismo comment is underselling it. This is a man who invented languages for fun, to the point where Quenya and Sindarin are actually intact enough as a language, including its structure, that you can legitimately make a dictionary and turn it into a real language. It's missing a
Wait, when?
lot, but it's more complete than Klingon.
How old would? When did Tolkien die?
In the 70s,
And how old was he?
he was like over 80. His first languages he actually invented when he was a kid.
I just want because if he lived like a decade or two later, imagine him in a role-playing game.
I think his opinions on that would have been this is he would admire the creative process, but he'd probably complain that they're trying to copy his stories too much and they should be more their own thing.
Well, no, I meant like him actually running a role-playing game.
Oh, I don't think he'd be that great at being able to handle sudden changes in the story.
Oh,
I get the feeling he's the type that doesn't really like surprise, abrupt changes because he did say he is most like a hobbit. Like he kind of low-key invented the Shire as kind of his ideal sort of life. He openly bragged about like I am most like a hobbit. I like my
in all,
food. I like to sit in my chair. I like my smokes, and I like to dress like an old man.
I was gonna say in all forms except physical, I am a hobbit.
I just have the mental image of Tolkien legitimately eating 6 meals a day. But yeah,
I
Woodman
need my
Adventures.
second
As for,
breakfast.
oh sorry,
I need my second breakfast.
that actually is that actually is, I believe, a form of meal that's sometimes celebrated in parts of Germany. Basically, you'd have an initial small breakfast to get yourself up, and then you'd do your morning tasks, and then before, because it's still early in the morning, you'd have like a smaller second breakfast. It's like I did my morning chores. Let's power up for the rest of the day, and it'd be like a bit of toast with some egg or something.
Oh, now after this, they get the customization, and I believe this is based on your callings.
By the way, the woodsmen can actually be pupils of wizards, which I think is pretty fun. So yeah, customizations are based on your callings. You can be a scholar, for example. You could be a slayer.
Slayer, treasure hunter, wanderer, warden, and that's it.
Yeah, they didn't have a lot of them, just a little bit. And that's what gives you your weaknesses.
Combat has various combat ratings,
Also, favorite
divergent.
attribute, it's similar in priority picking to the storyteller system.
Oh, then there's company creation. It, I guess basically how your group gets together. Oh, and here, the fellowship rating. They have a fellowship points. During the game, the players use these points to recover spent hope. Number of points available to company at the beginning of the game is equal to the number of heroes in the group.
By the way, if you're wondering, things that he skipped included combat ratings, which are things that you do have to factor in. But by the way, there are 4 different stances you can take in combat, since they kind of hint at it here, but they don't go into details about that. Yes, you have to actually determine your combat stances in this game. That is both for the good and for the ill of this property, I think. Yeah, a first meeting. You can legitimately meet in a bar. That pretty commonly happens. Not even kidding. The Prancing Pony. But the first meeting places usually will take place perhaps in Bjorn's house, Esgaroth, or Rosgabal. That's the place. That's the place where Radagast heals the sick CGI hedgehog with a bong pipe, and then gets on his
Imagine,
rabbit sled.
imagine the smell. You know that guy does not keep any sanitation.
Well, again, they made him a Harry Potter wizard rather than a real wizard. He was always described as being lesser than his compadres, but that wasn't a sign that he was stupid. Like he was compassionate, yes, but he wasn't a dummy. He was picked. He was essentially volunteered and picked because he had the potential to aid in their quests. Did he fail? Yeah, all the wizards did except Gandalf. But at least he can say that he didn't fall like the blue wizards and fall like Saruman.
Wait, the blue wizards fell?
No one knows their fate, but it's hinted that the mystery cults that appear among the East are their fault.
So aren't they angels though?
Yes, they are. They are angels cloaked in the flesh of men.
So how did that play out when they returned?
Oh, they probably just burned their because there's two aspects of all beings. There's the Hroa, which is the body, and then there's the Fea, which is the soul. They probably just burned their mortal bodies and just turned back to what they would have been. Either that or Gandalf just liked being an old man so much he kept it.
No, I meant like the realization that they fell.
Uh, there's a reason. Well, there's a reason Saruman became so much more pathetic when he lost his power.
Oh,
Remember,
did he?
because in the books they don't show it because in the movies they just kill him. But in the books, he's basically wearing this grody, like his white robes are tattered. He's leaning on a staff. He's basically even more miserable and angry. And Wormtongue actually is acting more and more like Gollum during this time. Literally crawling on his hands and knees, going "my master" and like simpering and sobbing. Like it just shows the decline in patheticness if you let your sins go unchecked, which Saruman's was pride. He was too proud to just admit I'm at fault. I'm at fault. Take me in for justice. He couldn't do it.
Also, I do think this. I don't think I could see Christopher Lee acting like that.
He probably could if he probably would have if they decided to do the scouring of the Shire, but they chose not to do that because, you know, that kind of that kind of fucks with the pacing of the movies.
Yeah.
Look, I'm okay with
Radagast.
stuff not being included in the books if it makes for a better movie, as long as you keep to the respect of the film. Like if you keep the respect, like if it's not a perfect adaptation, you have to get the spirit right.
Exactly.
The Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy does a pretty damn good job. I mean, it kind of does a complete botch job on Gimli's character, but other than that, it's pretty solid.
I mean, you're adapting hundreds of pages of a book into.
Yeah, but let's be fair. Gimli in the books was actually a soulful poet who is very good with his words. He wasn't John Rhys Davies going, "Not the beard."
Eh,
Like he wasn't an idiot.
well,
By the way, I
moving
don't
it.
hate the change because honestly, it's still a fun character dynamic. I'm just pointing out that that's a very big change. Also, another big change is Elrond is supposed to actually be a lot gentler and kinder. Hilariously, the Rings of Power Elrond being all this civil, being this civil guy is a bit closer to the book, but because everything else about the character is shit, it doesn't matter. Because he's again described as kind of as summer, and Agent Smith
Hmm,
doesn't quite nail that. He's a little too foreboding.
yeah.
He's a little too foreboding. So the attributes, summary of the uses of a character's attribute scores. Body is determined. It helps determine your starting
Yeah.
damage bonus.
We got that. With the body's physical, heart is spirit,
Yeah.
wits is mental.
Heart plays
Um,
with your fear and corruption tests, and recovering and healing from wound. Will is the difficulty to hit a hero because your wits basically allows you to. It's both intellect and dexterity.
and attributes can range from 1 to 12.
Yep. Although you're not going to usually find 12s too often.
Yeah.
Average is
And
about
then
3 to 4.
and then skills, you can obviously have none and go up to 6, which would mean you're rolling 7 dice.
Yeah, you can do some insane shit if you have enough of the stats. And they also give you your common skill categories, which we've kind of seen in the character sheet. So I think we can move on from there.
Yeah. But I found it interesting. The body skills include song, and battle actually is in the heart skill.
Which I think is interesting.
I think it's probably why they have different combat stances. It doesn't seem like combat is intrinsically applied to
I think this is
skill.
more mechanistic. Basically, they don't want you to be a min-maxing idiot.
Yeah, they say that there's only these groups: personality, movement, perception, survival, custom, and vocation.
I legitimately think the way they do this is just so you don't unbalance yourself too much.
Yeah.
Which, hey, that's fine. There's a logic for each of their picks too. Because
Oh, yeah.
body having
Oh,
a high body for craft makes sense if you're like a smith.
I think this is why, because they have weapon skills. You have specific weapons: axes, bows, spears, swords. Looks like daggers and mattocks are separate.
Oh, by the way, if you're wondering what I really like, is that each of the skills have a little quote from The Hobbit. Each and every one of them do. For example, for courtesy, that's Heart and Custom. You have nice manners for a thief and a liar, said the dragon. That's from Smaug's big speech. By the way, one of the two best parts of the films, and it's the one most unchanged from the book. Tolkien wasn't great at writing. He can be on the dry side when he's just talking about getting to places. I think it did pretty good. There's a reason why he's like one of the most well-known authors ever to live.
I mean,
Is he the best
Lovecraft.
writer ever? Fuck no.
Lovecraft, brilliant concepts, a lot of purple prose,
Oh yeah,
not good with
Lovecraft
characters.
stuff is pretty unreadable sometimes, depending on which of his books you read. Tolkien, yeah, I'll own up. He's completely dry. As a kid, I actually could not finish The Hobbit initially because the first few pages are dull as dog shit. It only comes together when you get to the part where the dwarves are, basically fucking over Bilbo by stealing his food and setting up a party. And yes, he was better at world building. Funnily enough, the best part about this is The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings were legitimately just side projects as he was working on the Silmarillion. Alex, what part of? I never said that part. It's one of the most the unmodified parts are my favorite part. Also, I think the reason they did that was to kind of establish that he's in danger rather than if he was invisible. Also, keep in mind that they have the invisibility filter that's on it the whole time. That would probably look really fucking terrible. Because remember, they have that weird desaturated filter on the ring each time he's wearing it. I don't think it ruins the scene. In my opinion, I think the part that ruins Smaug, and that's the parts that are modified, are when they turned him into a big, dumb, silent monster when they did the dwarf chase scene. By the way, I do recommend there's two really good edits of the Hobbit trilogy. There's the M4 edit, which I do like a lot, and then there's the Maple Film edit, which also does a pretty good job. Both of them take a 9 hours of slop and turn it into 4 hours of pretty good film. There's a couple stuff that just still sucks no matter what, like the Goblin King being a dancy fucking asshole. Yes, the Goblin Town song is in the book. No, he wasn't a fucking caricature clown.
I don't know. I like the big goblin monster.
I don't like the Goblin redesigns.
Maybe it's because of the miniature.
But no, I don't think I don't think the him being visible is the problem, especially since it did well despite that. I think the subplot around him working with Sauron was the problem. I don't like that part.
Well, wait, they're evil creatures. Why aren't the evil guys working together?
I mean, low key, that's only because in the books that they kind of expand that Gandalf wanted to take out Smaug before Sauron could work for them, but they weren't working together at all. Smaug was just doing his own thing. But no, like I said, if you thought the Hobbit trilogy was okay and had a lot of issues with it, there's some really good fan edits that actually cut it down to a really good film. There's a few that also do what's called a two-film deal where they kind of splice it down to two, which helps a lot.
Let's see. After the weapons skills, we have traits, and traits can be used to, I guess, advance, make an automatic action, uh, invoking a trait to allow a die roll in a situation that would normally be out of your control.
Taking off the ring Rex's character development. Okay, my rebuttal to that is, by comparison, when he did it with the spiders, it was a million times more retarded. Like I remember the movies pretty cleanly, and honestly, I don't quite think it's as ruining as you're trying to emphasize. Because you can also interpret it as a case of Smaug knows he's fucking there. He was looking kind of right at him because, he has excellent other senses like hearing, which Bilbo was trying his best, but he was on gold, and smell. So you could argue that Bilbo thought, fuck, the game's up. Let's
Actually,
try
wait.
to flatter him so I don't die.
Actually, wait. Couldn't technically you smell someone who's invisible? You just can't see them.
Smaug has an excellent sense of smell, and also remember Bilbo was on treasure that was clearly moving and or making noise, despite his best efforts to be quiet. So, like, there's at least enough logical reasons in the film that it's not as dumb as the time he tried to face down Azog in the first movie, or the time he took the ring off to taunt the spiders in the second movie. Smaug knew he was there anyway after he took the cup. Yeah, but that's from the book. Like they changed up that stuff, dude. Like you're kind of arguing from two different mediums here. And I'm arguing from the point of view of, do you really want him to be in the invisible ring filter the entire conversation so it looks like a drug nightmare? Because keep in mind they have an ugly ring filter. Or do you want to see the CGI dragon just kind of looking at air? Like they're trying to factor it in from a visual point of view because that's the medium, dude. I don't know how to explain it. In my opinion, The Hobbit should have been two movies divided by the Misty Mountains. In the original cut, it was they actually split the movie for some reason. I think they split it at the barrel scene in the original take. They changed it. They changed the movie. It was dumb as hell. Duh. No shit. There's a lot of changes though that I think are an order of magnitude worse. Case in point, the Dol Guldur plotline. And if you watch the expanded cut, when they brought Thrain in, even though Thrain was already dead in the books, and there was no point in doing this, and they killed him with a Wilhelm scream. I'm not even kidding. I'm not even
Okay.
kidding. In the expanded cut of the Desolation of Smaug, Thrain dies to Sauron, and you hear him die via fucking Wilhelm scream. That I think is the the greatest example of failure in that fucking movie.
It'd be like putting hip hop or rap into a movie about a trailer for a movie about Rome.
Here's the sad thing. I think if you found the right hip hop song, you could have actually made it work. It just has to actually be like the right vibe. Because a lot of things with movies, especially with music, is it's the vibe.
Yeah.
Oh, there is so much that I could legitimately rant for like hours about the Hobbit trilogy. It's a disaster. It is a complete and total disaster. They couldn't even shove in like Thranduil's own motivations. They couldn't put in the film. Like, why does he like the white gems? Well, they keep going in during the development like he wanted them because they're what's left that he remembers of his wife. They were basically gems he commissioned to form a necklace for her, and then she died, and he just wanted them back so he can still remember her. But they don't put it in the fucking movie. They don't put that in the movie. So like that entire arc is cut off. You have the one-dimensional bad guys that are the Master and Alfred. That's shit. You have Bard trusting Alfred, which could have led to them getting totally killed by orcs. There's the time he uses his son as part of a ballista. I think that is single-handedly the shittiest thing in the Battle of the Five Armies. Oh, my bow
why
is
do you
broken. Let's launch this into the wreckage of a bell tower. Now stand here, son. We gotta do
but
that. No one can outshoot like Gaston as he shoots the fucking
but
arrow
but
into him.
listen, why are you complaining about this? This is just a dumb fantasy movie for kids.
Cut to the part where the chariots chop the legs off of the orcs and blood spurts out of their leg arteries as they die.
It doesn't even have complex themes.
I'm not even kidding. The only movie in the trilogy that's rated R is the Battle of the Five Armies Extended Edition, and it's because they went ham on the blood. They went completely ridiculous on the blood. There's a bit where they decapitate like 12 trolls and their heads, their arteries start splurting out of their necks. Like you see their neck stumps shooting fountains of black blood as they fall. Like, I'm
With
not
that,
saying the Hobbit movies are good. I fucking don't like. I only really like the first one somewhat, and even then, its pacing is bad, and the saturation makes my eyes bleed a bit. And there's the worst video game sequence in it with the Goblin Town escape. Oh god, I forgot about the fucking Thunder Battle. Fuck. There's so much bad about. Oh my god. Let's just
well,
move on.
yeah. So, oh, interesting. One of the traits is smoking.
Well, yeah. Basically, it allows you to do funny ring smokes.
Pipe weed, pipe weed or leaf.
Yep. Basically, one of the funniest things you can do is you can make shapes out of your pipe smoke.
It's smooth and mild.
Oh yeah. By the way, fun fact: Saruman actually, that's something they didn't have in the movies, which is sad, but it's a long trilogy. Sauron actually low key made fun of Gandalf repeatedly for being addicted to pipeweed. He himself was actually addicted to pipeweed to the point where he regularly imported as much as he could from the Shire.
I need more of that pipe weed, man.
Gandalf basically gave him some, and Saruman was like, only a fool would addle his mind with such substances. He then begins toking secretly and has become an even bigger addict than Gandalf.
Listen, you can't prove that I'm a pipe weed smoker.
You see
There's not, there's
boxes
not
of
any of
long
it there.
bottom leaf and old Toby in the background.
So he's on the Palantir. Anime sucks, Cope and Sneed.
No, it's great Lord. No. It'd be like, which king of Angmar says, which king of Angmar? It sucks. Camul rules said. No, he does. Oh, they do. I forgot about that. I thought they might have cut that out. That's a good point, Alex. All right. I thought they might have cut that out for brevity purposes.
Let's see.
You never managed
There's
to finish any of the Hobbit movies? That's fair enough, Squirrel Killer, because each of them had moments which are bad. I would say that they're pretty entertaining though, up until the final movie. Smaug, get off of my lawn. But this is our yard! Correction. It used to be yours. Now it is mine. Allow me to illustrate as I assume my claim to it. Sets dwarves on fire. Yeah, that's literally how dragons think.
let's
That
see.
is literally how dragons think.
Then outside of the traits, there's valor and wisdom. Wisdom
And
is
these are all the traits that you can pick.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
these are some of the things like fire making, which if you're wondering why fire making is a thing in the Hobbit, that's actually really critical to setting fires and things. Owen and Gloin were among the best among that. I'm not even kidding. They actually mentioned that like dwarves are notoriously good at setting fires.
They're arsonists.
I mean, if you want to play an arsonist dwarf, why not? But yeah, valor and wisdom.
So wisdom is just the hero's adventure perfecting subtly but profoundly. Valor, deci- he is deciding that his actions and his judgment will prove his status in the eyes of others.
Yep. Also, if you're wondering, when I said advanced classes for rangers and among the high elves, basically they start at higher valor and wisdom levels. That
Well, I mean
that's
that's true.
that's
That's
from what I
true. A
recall.
ranger, again, wood elf stays in the forest. A ranger goes into the forest and gets out of it and kills things.
So keep in mind that an elf that has probably been alive for up to, I don't know, let's go with 1500 years. I think that's a pretty fair. That's not young, but it's not old. Yeah, like 1500-year-old elf, less wise and learned than a fucking ranger.
Yeah, but can he take on Celebrimbor's ring and defeat and rule the armies of orcs?
You you know, that almost feels like something I'd hear in a Rings of Power plot when you said it that way.
And yet, that's the Shadow of Mordor franchise.
I mean, the first game's really fun. Second game, if I remember right, the mechanics of the game are great. It's just the storyline makes you want to rip out your eyes.
Yeah, but then you can recruit that dwarf that's a not dwarf, the orc that's a bard.
Oh, there's some
That's
cool
fun.
characters if I recall. Anyway, virtues and rewards. So virtues, the choice of virtue is the one that allows for the easiest individualization of the hero. Every time your wisdom score goes up a level, you receive a virtue. Which, if you're wondering what those virtues are, we kind of skimmed them a bit early. Actually, we're about to run into them again. You can also pick up masteries.
There's cultural virtues.
Birthright, for example, among the Bardingas, not this is only a few years after Dale has been reestablished. You might actually be heirs of like a long lost household that had nobility, because these are the descendants of Rovanion. Because there was actually a kingdom in the Wilderlands of Rovanion. I believe it was under Viducidas. They actually helped save Gondor from an Easterling tribal invasion. They collapsed and splintered apart a few dozen years later.
Let's see. Later on, the rewards. In the game, they select their possessions. Each time a hero's valor goes up one level, he receives a reward. Tells a new special quality upon one equipment item. Rewards can be given as tributes by his own folk or family, or by a munificent lord. Same thing, so you get like different qualities or cultural rewards.
Sorry, I was just like very quickly showing off because each of them have some pretty cool things. By the way, the hidden lineage that you get as a barding can allow you to actually basically replace your character with with a slightly less good character rather than starting from scratch or surviving things that should have killed you because your destiny's not finished yet. It's just kind of cool stuff like that. Each of them have each of them can pick something up if you improve your, I believe it's your virtues that you pick up. Each time you do, you can get some neat stuff. Like I said, this part of the game mechanic is fine. As for qualities, naming weapons of quality, here we go. Things like cunning make and close fitting. You can get keen, which a weapon's edge rating is reduced by 1, which produces a piercing blow when hitting a target. You can also have fell, hard and straight. A piercing blow from a fell weapon is stopped less easily. Injury ratings raised by 2. Oh yeah, here's the cultural rewards, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Again, among the men of Dale, the longbow is what they're remembered for, mainly because Bard slayed a dragon with one.
You get Spear of King Baldorithan.
So there was another king called Bladderthan. That is an actual character name. I
Hmm.
don't remember anything about them. As for
Oh,
the Bjornings, they have giant slaying spears because, again, they used to live in the Misty Mountains, which meant that they fought stone giants, which are hinted to maybe be particularly large species of trolls.
I like the cultural rewards for the Shire. They get a bow of North Downs, but the King's Blade as well. and they just find ancient swords inside fallen mounds and among tilled fields or washed ashore along a watercourse. Unable to discover their precise origin, they simply call them king's blades.
Well, yeah, because okay, so the reason this is the thing is because the Shire is near a long abandoned land known as Cardolan, and among many men cultures in Middle Earth, they would bury their dead, right? Cardolan was known to be quite obsessed with them, making a variety of barrow downs where they would bury their dead. It's usually not a good idea to try to crack them open because one of the things that the Witch King did to destroy them was to have evil spirits possess their corpses and walk around again.
Though I'm imagining a hobbit stumbling across a tomb, kind of like in Conan, or
Yeah,
just
you could.
picking up a sword.
No, you're joking, but that's actually legitimately what barrow downs kind of look like. Yeah, they're basically cairns, but with like actual like archways that you can go into. Where usually you'll find sarcophagi that have their likenesses or something like that, and they have their treasures from ages past. But they're usually cursed because, again, evil spirits have been living there for a long fucking time.
Hmm.
But hey, maybe you could have it be a case of where a ranger cleansed the barrows because they do that sometimes, and the hobbit just kind of found it again a few
And,
dozen
and,
years later.
and you see, a ranger does that. What does an elf do?
Kill a fuckload of spiders so they don't eat you while you sleep in your house.
I just get bug spray.
But yeah, hobbits they get the bows and stuff mainly because, well, in the Lord of the Rings, that's where they got their first swords. Frodo eventually gets Sting, but he started with a King's Blade essentially.
Hmm.
Also, the
And then,
bows of the Northdown. It is said that the Shire did send a company of archers because one of the other things that hobbits are surprisingly good at are marksmen.
hmm, and then we
Also,
have,
if you've ever played, funnily enough, if you've ever played Third Age Total War, Medieval 2 Total War modification, or Divide and Conquer, hobbits are lethal joke units. And here's why. They do awful damage, but they're one of the very few units that get armor piercing weaponry, which means
hmm,
that they can actually kill most units as long as you keep them protected pretty easily. In battles, they are among the units that tend to have the highest kill counts because of that. Like disturbingly so.
and then I assume they all go mad.
No, they went mad already because the moment you have them leave the Shire, they just kind of instantly go crazy, I guess. I was just joshing. So, how encumbrance works? The encumbrance rating of an item is used to limit the carrying capacity of a character. Basically, this prevents the problem where your parties hoard everything.
And then you have standards of living.
Yes,
You have different types
they
of.
mentioned
Oh,
that actually.
yeah.
Each of the cultural groups that we kind of looked at have a different level of prosperity. Men of Dale and, well, dwarves, extremely wealthy. Bjornings are pretty poor, although they've gotten more rich recently. Woodmen are poor. Hobbits, I believe, are prosperous.
Yep, and elves are martial.
Yep.
Then you have your different weapons, different armor.
By the way, that the reason that standards of living are a factor, that kind of determines whether or not you can buy any items that you lost or need to replace.
And life and death. So that's losing endurance and hope. So this is the corruption.
Here we
Shadow.
go. We're
Yep.
entering the mechanic I'm not a fan of. By the way, I do like that they go into details about each of the types of armor you can wear.
So shadow points reflect the marks left on a character when his spirit is tainted by doubt and despair. You spend hope to invoke an attribute. When the hope decreases to reach his shadow rating, the hero is considered to be miserable.
Yep.
A hopeless If a character has a hope score of 0, he is spiritually spent, cannot bear to continue the struggle of any sort, and will flee from any source of danger or stress.
Yep.
So he's just into a fight, and he's out of hope. He's just fuck this, I'm leaving.
Yep.
I can't fight
By
anymore.
the way, one of the things that shadow ratings raise based on the bullshit you experience.
I want to go home, Mr. Frodo.
I love the idea that Sam says that the moment that he sees that they have to go through mountains. Because, funnily enough, in the books, Bilbo first sees the Misty Mountains, and he is completely horrified at how fucking big they are, and he's like, is that the mountain?" And the dwarves look at him and start laughing, going, "No, no, no, we're not even close, little hobbit. Those are the Misty Mountains. Oh."
I want to go home.
But yeah, hobbits are keen-eyed as hell. The reason they were given armor piercing is legitimately because they can spot weak points.
And then,
There's also wounds, which you recover you recover endurance every day. Being wounded is more serious, where basically you check a wounded box. You can be knocked out. When a character's wounded box has already been checked as wounded again, you go unconscious.
yep.
And
And,
as for how dying works, if you're reduced to 0 endurance, you're dying.
and if they're not treated within 12 hours, they're dead
They can also be killed just straight up outright.
with a was a coup de grace
Yep.
or a killing blow.
As for poison, some monsters that you run into, like spiders, can poison you.
Or eating venison in a
Yep.
wrong part of Mirkwood. And then, let's see, Fellowship. So, Fellowship, I guess, is a pool of hope points. So,
You can
spend,
use them as such.
to spend Fellowship points, you must get permission from at least half of the other members of the company. If no permission is granted, a player may spend a point anyway and gain a shadow point for each Fellowship point spent. Ooh, that's
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, essentially, it does kind of cause trouble because it each point you use adds a shadow point.
Well, as long as if you don't get permission.
Oh, you can spend them anyway, yeah, because you're being selfish.
Yep,
I like that.
that does. Successfully keeping the Fellowship focus safe might inspire a hero, let them recover points. If a player spends a hope point to invoke an attribute bonus to accomplish a mission that is considered directly protect uh, or favor his fellowship focus and succeeds, he immediately recovers the hope point he just spent. Also, character gains a point of shadow if his fellowship focus was wounded, or 3 points if the focus was killed,
Yep.
covering a point uh, if his fellowship focus didn't become wounded.
Because basically, the idea is you failed. That's why.
So it's a big resource pool.
Uh, Here's one that's important: treasure. Because so the in this time period, you're deep within the third age of the sun. Middle Earth has had a long history prior to this. It is at this time of this book 2946, third age of the sun. The second age was 3,400 or so years, and the first age was 576. Sounds a lot shorter in the first age, but that's because that kind of bleeds into the year of the trees, which I believe is another couple thousand years. And then after that were the year of the lamps, which each one of those is like 14,000 years, I think. Arda is old, very old.
Almost
And
like
as for
like
this time period, I'll be frank. First off, Year of the Lamps, there wasn't any living sentient creatures, but you can find ruins from the first age. You can find ruins from the Year of the Trees because the dwarves and elves were still walking during those time periods. This was before the sun and moon were a thing. Which, if you're wondering, in the Rings of Power, When Galadriel boasts about doing this longer than the sun was a thing, she's not boasting. She was alive before the sun was a thing. That's not the reason that entire show sucks. It's because they fucking suck at writing. It's just one of those weird. They use the bit from canon, but it doesn't matter because you made garbage and have no fucking respect for it anyway.
So back onto treasure.
But yeah,
So
there's
a
a
rating
lot
of
of treasure you can find, like
yeah,
thousands of years worth of stuff.
a rating of 1 is enough for one adventurer to spend 1 month at a prosperous standard. So just finding treasure is good enough.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You
and
get you get you
the
get to though 1,000, and that's 100th share of a dragon of Smaug's horde.
yeah, like they give standards. Like one, it's enough for an adventurer to spend a pretty good living for a month at prosperous. Two, you can spend a month at rich. Five is princely. 10 is a goblin horde. 50 is an orc chieftain horde. 100 is a large horde. 200 is a troll horde, which, if you're wondering, Bilbo gave up his share of Smaug's treasure because he couldn't carry it, and on top of that, he kind of burned it away by giving the Arkenstone. If you're wondering what gold he actually picked up, it was from the troll horde. It was from his share of the troll horde.
But then next there's standing, which is basically you returning to your local community and them really looking at you odd because you up and abandoned everything.
This is more of a Shire thing.
I guess it's more your position among your community.
Yep. If you have no rating, you're a homeless vagabond, wandering conjurers, or unknown adventurers. High elf bug spray, that's orcish technology. And I'll have no such thing in this treehouse house elf servant, so yes, I'll take 12, thank you. Um, you're joking, but one of the other weird factors is that goblins and orcs are actually pretty clever. They don't show it as much in the Lord of the Rings movies or in The Hobbit as much, but they are known for actually inventing a lot of interesting devices. They are the ones that actually invented gunpowder, after all. Mainly because they delight in things that cause pain or cause explosions. Also, if you're wondering why Rangers are rated at 1, um, here's the thing. 9 times out of 10, people don't know that you're actually the descendant of like a long lost group of people that used to be kings and lords and shit. No, they see you as the scrubby asshole that can murder people for money or whatever. You're the creepy guy that in the bar that no one trusts. And then from there it goes up. Here we go, the adventuring phase, and this is a decent little piece of art of the Karak. That's the large stone from that's in the middle of the river that they land on in the first movie at the end.
Hmm.
In the first movie, Peter Jackson went whole hard on trying to make it look like a bear.
So just looking at the adventuring phase, it's your basic. How does a scene work?
Yeah, how does
How to
scene work? I'm not a
uh,
fan of RPGs kind of doing this somewhat. Again, because it feels like they're trying to video gamify it.
yeah. I'd say let's move on then to
But the way they do it is here's how it goes. You declare intent, you set the test number, the game master does that. You apply a trait or virtue. You can then roll dice if you have it. If you don't do that, and then you add up the results. And you can add attributes at the end.
yep, and then you have
Typical
like
test.
the
By the
whole.
way, this is giving me flashbacks to Mouse Guard, which did the same thing. I don't like when games do this. I
There's
don't
also
think you need to go this nitty gritty on this sort of stuff.
a journey section. Is you questing along the way?
Also, another thing is they go into details about how failures work. Honestly, I don't like how they kind of go into
Yeah,
details about this. Mm.
yeah, and they have a whole system for traveling.
Yeah, which I
You,
think is dumb.
I mean, it is a part of the Lord of the Rings.
True,
You are walking a lot.
you are, but the problem is, I feel like that can be dealt with, like having an entire section just based on that. It feels weird.
Yeah, it's on like seems more like
I
a
get it,
resource
but it
management.
just there's a fun meme where it's like 3 hour journey only takes less than 5 minutes in an RPG game. 5 minute battle takes over 3 hours in the RPG game. But yeah, journeys. So journey rules. The rules for journey resolution help the lore master make traveling a significant part of an adventure. I feel like that's fucking up. No offense, but I kind of feel like this is a fuck up.
We're going on an adventure. Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
It
Are
feels
we
like
there
you want
yet?
to play a board game, you know? Just it feels poor. It just feels like a weird decision. But I get it, but like why?
It's like you're trying to play Dungeons and Dragons, but you break out Oregon Trail.
An experienced company differs from a random group of adventurers in the capability of its members. Players assign their characters a role for the journey, summarizing what their character will be doing, and the roles include guide, scout, huntsman, and lookout man. By the way, there's another book that actually plays what's called the Eye of Sauron mechanic. That's a thing. Which
Although I'd love if you make your Hobbit the Scout. The
they are
enemy.
keen-eyed. They're pretty good at it.
Fair.
They're pretty quiet too. In fact, actually, that's one of the reasons why Bilbo tried to prove that he could be a decent thief slash burglar. That's actually what in the books the trolls weren't stealing the ponies. What happened was the dwarves saw that there was a fire and they were low on provisions because basically they lost a lot because the rains caused the flooding, which caused them to lose some of it. And I think one of the ponies got startled earlier. So Bilbo was just trying to see what the hell it was, maybe get some food. Saw they were trolls, and basically he was originally going to go warn the dwarves, but then he decided, I'm going to prove that I'm a burglar. So he tries to steal one of the trolls' wallets. In the movie, they try to make it make more sense by having him try to save the ponies, but in the book, he just wanted to prove himself. By the way, the wallet was enchanted. It could actually speak if it was getting stolen.
Oh, it had an alarm system.
It literally, Bilbo takes it and the wallet squeaks, "Hey, what you doing here?"
But then there's a whole section on combat, on being ambushed, um, combat
Also,
rounds.
here's an example of what the maps look like, and they have a coding. Map key, if it's completely opaque, it's very easy. If it's white, it's easy. If it's green, it's moderate. If it's orange, it's hard. Brown's severe, and red is daunting. It's sideways, but you can see that a lot of Mirkwood is what we call fucking terrible. God damn, Thranduil, what are you doing? You fucking clown.
Listen, it's my forest, and I want to stay here.
It's my forest and I'm gonna fuck it up. By the way, if you're wondering why the Misty Mountains only has like 3 areas that are red, it's because the other areas are supposed to be unpassable. Because there's a lot of paths on the Misty Mountains. A lot of them either don't go anywhere or will just lead you to bad ends. I feel like having the hex map. Also, yes, they use a hex map system. I get it, but on the other hand, I don't. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, I'm just going through the combat section. There's a whole lot of stuff on, I guess, various modifiers and
Yeah, because
actions
you
that
have
can be done.
speed,
I'm gonna
which gives you
skip
miles
to
per
the.
day. This is stuff that if you're really particular about is cool, but I can
Mm,
tell you most players don't give a fuck about this shit.
skip to 192.
Fatigue
That's
test.
where.
By the way, seasons. The seasons. This is one fatigue test every X number of days. Region tables include the Freelands, Borderlands, Wildlands, Shadowlands, and Darklands. Assign journey advantages. Like this is just this is a segment of the book that again makes me remind you that I don't like it because I get what they're trying to do. They are trying to really emphasize the journey and the wandering that you would do in the land of Middle Earth. But the problem is these mechanics are going to just scare off people usually, and they're not going to bother fucking calculating any of this. In my opinion, I don't think any of them would really calculate this. I've gamed with a lot of people, so I can kind of get the feeling most tables would probably cut this shit.
But so page 192 is the fellowship phase. So we can finally understand what the hell this is.
Well, they also give you ideas where there's traveling expenses, where like you can use ponies and boats, because again, you would usually use that. They also tell you the standards of living. A poor and frugal person, they can't afford the expense. Marshals can borrow a pony or a boat if they're from the region. Prosperous can afford to pay one. No, no. Here's the thing, Scroll Killer. In your own description, where you're like, no, even no, I do this. You are saying no. You plan this out and then kind of essentially quick skim this. They're doing this like literally hex by hex from what I'm looking at, because you have to calculate every 20 miles, miles per day. And they, by the way, do give you the mile. They do give you the miles here, so you have to actually do this shit via rulers and everything.
And also, if you're in a metric system society, you're fucked. You're not going to have to learn the imperial system.
No, you don't. They give you the miles here that you can just use that as the guide. I
Oh,
just think this is what we call in the business a massive fucking failure. I just think that no one would actually go to this degree. At least not a lot of people. Yeah, that's the other thing, Scroll Killer. You pre-roll your encounters. Most people, what they would do is they would set up randomly generated stuff ahead of time, and then this would be where you would roll like your D12 feat die, which gives you things like hazards or so on. Because they mentioned that hazards, some things you can run into: wariness, misery, fatigue, wound, or corruption, which I also think is pretty stupid. Literally, you randomly generate a hazard like wariness, fatigue, and then you can have a dangerous meeting where you have to improvise a combat encounter. Are you fucking kidding me, dude? This is one of the parts I think the game kind of falls apart a bit. So
and this is
here's some of the hazards you can do. Sample hazard episodes: lost direction, uncomfortable lodgings, cruel weather, monsters roused, from hunter to prey. Eh.
truly the epic stuff of a hero.
By the way, this is insulting. Using Hobbit Tales. If the lore master owns a copy of the Hobbit Tales from the Green Dragon Inn, then the deck of cards. Fuck you. Fuck you. No, just instantly. Fuck you. I hate. I hate when RPGs try to introduce cards. No, that shit's verboten in my fucking tables. I hate that shit. It's
What
one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of there's a Western game that does that called Aces and Eights. Not a fan of that. No. So actions while traveling, recovering endurance while traveling. You may be forced by circumstances to start a journey while still recovering. So they give you details on how this work. Encounters. Journey is arguably the most important moment to present the company with an unforeseen meeting with new characters, including important personalities. Um, just expect them to kill them on the first encounter. No, seriously, they will try to kill them as soon as they fucking can. So they give a sample journey. Below are some sample routes that every group of companions will likely undertake at some point. From Lonely Mountain to Bjorn's house, they intend to go along the edge of the forest and round its northern ends in the waste that lay between it and the beginning of the Grey Mountains. Which, if you're wondering, they actually go into details on why this is not a good path. At least in the time of the Hobbit, it has changed notably during this time period. So the reasons why they went through Mirkwood, especially along the Elf Road, is because if you went too far north, you got close to the Grey Mountains, which are completely filled with orcs. If you went too far south, you'd run into the Necromancer. This is kind
He
of their
doesn't seem
best
like a bad
hope.
guy.
But this is 2946. This is after the Battle of the Five Armies. Going north is actually safer than going through Mirkwood at this point, especially because something that funnily enough, them getting lost around the Enchanted Stream actually helped them. Do you want to know why?
Why?
Because the elf road on the other end actually devolved into swamps and bogs because the elves couldn't maintain them anymore.
Again, another reason why the Rangers are superior.
The Rangers can't even barely manage to keep one city alive, let alone fucking an entire kingdom.
Yes, but the elves can barely handle an infrastructure. Just any at all.
Oh, well, that's because the Rangers don't bother maintaining shit. They don't. They literally don't.
Exactly. Why worry about that when you can go off killing orcs?
Saruman should have given Orkenheimer more time to finish the Mordor project. I'm just now envisioning
It's just,
an
it's
orc just building the first a crude nuclear atomic bomb.
it's not. It's just a big firebomb.
I am become death, destroyer of worlds. But unlike Oppenheimer, he wouldn't be horrified. He'd be like fucking gleeful, like hell yeah. By the way, in the Hobbit, the goblins and orcs are known for making fun jives and jokes. Like they were a lot more cruel with their whimsically cruel, so to speak. So let's see. They go into details about this is like they literally do the route. First leg, Northern Dalelands, Borderland. 90 miles across open terrain, 5 days, fatigue tests. Second leg, 17 days, fatigue tests. Third leg, oh god, this is awful. No, I legitimately think this is terrible.
This is why games included fast travel.
Well, it's not really that. It's like this is
Yeah.
why usually you don't go this particular about the scenario, you know?
And because kind of the game is designed to get into the action.
I mean, the game here is trying to make the travel part of it, but like they're fucking it up.
Just include like a brief snippet.
Oh my god, and then they give another example. This is awful. This is fucking terrible.
That's what I'm saying. Get to the fellowship section.
No, I need to show this because of how fucking bad it is. Here we go, combat. So, part of the reasons you join a company is strength in numbers. So here's how combat works. In the books, the episodes featuring fights and battles vary widely in presentation, as they are set in diverse locations and born out of narrative needs. So, let's see. By threatening the companions with death, the lore master is giving the players the opportunity to demonstrate the heroic stature of their characters by putting their lives in dangers. He is making the grit. No, it's just to wake up. It's just to wake up Ted, who's like looking at his phone, looking like he's about to fall asleep from all the goddamn journey rolls he had to do. He's on the floor. His dwarven slayer is like fucking almost brainless. He's just twitching and vibrating at the desire to slaughter Orc. And there's no orc. It's just, oh no, we lost a donkey. Oh no, we ran into some stupid men, which almost brought him to life because he's like, it's time to murder. But no, it just turned out they were just asshole merchants that tried to screw them out of money.
So you met other dwarves.
I don't know. So they go into this
Oh
onset of combat. It's dramatic and momentous event. Blah blah blah.
wait,
Step one.
Orkenheimer. Wait. Oh, that was beautiful. Just beautiful. All right, boys, load up the next one.
So the steps include resolve surprise attacks first, then determine initiative, assign combat advantages, and then resolve opening volleys. Proceed to close quarters. Stage 1, surprise attacks. This is legitimately what always starts with ambushes. If the company is ambushed, the heroes roll awareness, battle, or hunting. If you fail, you're still surprised. You cannot roll for combat advantages or opening volleys. No, warn another companion on a 6 or 2 companions on 2 6s. Ambushing enemies, you roll stealth, battle, or hunting. All companions must pass the test or the ambush fails. So, being ambushed. The companions are alert with all heroes on the lookout or advancing in an area unfit for ambushing. Moderately alert. Oh my god, like even when they're describing combat, they're making this like fucking wallpaper drawing.
I guess
Ugh.
it is supposed to be experiencing the Lord of the Rings then.
No, even that's not as dull.
But also is continuing. I want to see Rohan wiped off the map.
You know, funnily enough, they never did. Like I said, they never did a Gondor, and I'm not sure if that's because the way the rights situation was. I'm kind of leaning towards it being that they never focused on it, and they might have done it on second edition, but then Christopher Tolkien died and they got into trouble. Hey there, Jim. We're in the most dull description of combat ever, which gives the test numbers for each scenario humanly fucking possible.
Actually, question: is this duller than Fatal when it comes to their combat?
I would argue no, because while it is just tedious because of all of the examples they give, it at least is trying to remind you how the test numbers work. It's just
Wait,
it's such a bad decision. Now I don't know if second edition that Free Leagues made is any better, but first edition this is one of the doldrum parts. So determining initiative, how does this work? The company's defending. This is the most common combat situation faced by adventurers. Both the company and its oppositions are aware. Defending companions will hold the initiative. If the company is attacking, both the company and its enemies are armed and ready. The enemies will hold the initiative. So, funnily enough, the defenders always have initiative, it seems like.
hmm.
Which I think is dumb, but okay.
Even if you're taken by surprise,
Yeah, apparently.
then what's the point of being taken by surprise?
Because you can't do any opening volleys and you don't get to assign combat attributes, combat advantages to your attacks. Like, that's the point, but that kind of low-key makes ambushes not as good. Also, it punishes you if you have a person not good in stealth. Which is fitting, but, like, it makes ambushes kind of pointless for at least the heroes. They actually give a variety of situations, by the way, where this would factor in. So, like, if the companions were ambushed, but at least half of them passed the surprise test, it'd be the company. If they were ambushed, but more than half of them failed, it'd be the enemy, which does make sense, so that's something. I don't know why they did. I don't know why they had to do it in the chart, though. I feel like the game is trying to give you too many particular examples, and that's dragging it down.
Yeah,
Like this
like
just drags it down.
I'm scrolling ahead and they give up the called shots and it's each weapon does a specific thing with a called shot.
Yep. Oh no,
Or actually no,
that means you missed the combat stances because there are 4 combat stances, motherfucker. There is forward, combat test number 6, order of action 1. Close combat, exploiting any opportunity to attack to the point of exposing yourself. Then there's open, combat test number 9, order of action 2. Then there's defensive, where you're third rank, combat test number 12. Combat test number being, I think, the number needed to hit you, by the way. I think. There are no restrictions. A hero who spends his weapons, choose a stance, order of action, combat stances. As long as the hero makes a close combat and uses his stance numbers TN when making an attack roll. What? Uses his stance's combat test number when making an attack roll. Forward combat TN actually is lower than the... What? What?
fucking Rifts may have had a better sense of combat than
No, no
this.
offense, but like, why is forward then lower? I assumed that was the number needed to hit you. Like when you factor in your combat skills, you then add that number.
Well, I maybe it's when the enemy's attacking you?
I think that's the case, but the way they describe it is fucking terrible. You use the stance's combat TN when making an attack roll using the close combat weapon. The same TN is used by the lore master for all close combat attack rolls against that character. A hero fighting in a forward stance has a combat TN of 6. He will use this number when rolling to hit an enemy. What?
Oh, so, no, because
Oh, it's the difficulty. Okay, so I was right. It was just confusing me.
yeah, it's easier. It's easier for you to attack, but it's also easier for the
And
enemy
also
to
you go
attack you.
earlier. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. That was just absolutely giving me brain damage though. Yeah, that's not very that's an example where you need the example to make this make sense. Holy shit, that was terrible.
Yeah.
That was terrible. Also, rearward is last. That's just for range combat, guys. Okay, that makes a lot more sense, but like that does actually break my brain. Holy shit. Holy fucking shit. So, engagement. When every player is determined the stance their hero will fight in, all combatants must engage in one or more opponents. More enemies than heroes. Lore Master pairs each unengaged creature with an unengaged companion in close combat. Remaining creatures can either engage a hero who's already engaged or stand back, possibly to attack using a ranged weapon. Uh, okay. When it's the company's turn to act, the players stake their actions in the order determined by their stances. That part actually made sense. It's just for some reason the test number was making my brain hurt. And here's how the attack rolls work. You use your body as the attribute bonus. Your stance, the test number is is your stance test number plus the parry. And ranged combat is 12 plus their parry. They apparently also have a brawling attack. Without a proper weapon can make a brawling attack. Brawling attacks are made using the dagger weapon skill, causing 1 endurance points worth of damage on a successful roll. I okay.
Same thing for throwing attacks as
That
well.
that's okay.
They
I,
have rules for removing a helm.
yes, they do.
You don't need to be this complex.
I feel like they're just trying to throw in things that were in the book or in the movies.
I get quite honest. When I'm thinking of combat in a Lord of the Rings setting, I'm not really thinking of highly technical combat.
Neither do I. I just kind of go with what works for the story. Also, fighting in full helm causes an encumbrance rating. No, no. Like you're trying to justify taking off your helmet to look cool, but no, no.
I kind of do like that. It's like in Warhammer when all your space marines are helmeted except for the leader, and yet somehow they don't get shot.
Also, there's piercing blows. During combat, a fighter can see his stamina be slowly whittled away because damage initially goes onto your endurance. It's when it gets knocked to 0 that you get your wounds and then die. In addition to causing loss of endurance points, any successful attack may inflict a piercing blow. If the feat die result in the initial roll is equal to or higher than the edge rating of the weapon, it's a piercing blow. You have to make a protection test to avoid being wounded. And how does that work? You roll a feat die plus the number of success dice equal to the protection value of your armor, which means your an armor class is actually variable. Which I don't hate. I do feel like these are a lot of rules you have to memorize though, which is starting to kind of lower the compliments that I had for this
Yeah.
book. Because like legitimately your defense values vary heavily. There's not a lot to, there's really not a lot that you can play with on that.
And then you have
The call
called shots,
hmm
which I believe if you get a successful called shot, if you hit with the axe or the mattock, it just smashes their shield.
Yep.
Bows and spears indicate a piercing blow, and a sword, the target drops his weapon.
Also, spears get a piercing blow no matter what the feat die tells you it is. Which, if you're, which again, piercing blows the way they work are If the feat die in the initial attack roll is equal to or higher than the edge rating of the weapon, piercing blow.
It just automatically wounds them with it.
Variable armor class. Yep, Jim. The way it works is you have to roll the protection rating of your armor, which is actually the number of dice pulls that you work with, number of d6s, plus, again, feat die. You literally roll the d12 and the number of d6s your armor is worth, and that determines whether or not you can avoid getting wounded with a piercing blow. Which means, hey, if you're really unlucky, you could just drop dead in the first round. Like, let's say you got Orcaball, the Orc Chieftain, like this ratty fucking little fucking Mines of Moria little bitch. He's not a good shot with a bow. He has at least one dice in it, but he manages to get the edge rating of his shitty orc bow. Well, congratulations. Well, congratulations. Vitin, son of Witin, is dead because he critically failed his armor with the Sauron roll. He's dead now. I'm just giving a really stupid example, but like that's kind of what they accidentally have created here. What do you think of that? Where you could just drop dead if you get hit twice.
Honestly, that does feel fitting for a lower enemy character, but no, not for your player characters.
Oh no. Like if you're unlucky with your protection rolls, you could just get wounded, and then if you get hit again, you're just dead.
Also, Jimmy, yes, more complicated than
Oh hell
necessary.
yeah, it's terrible. Like they give really specific and stupid examples for brawling with daggers and throwing attacks, and they give the test number value of each and every one. It's awful. This is fucking awful. The basic concept's fine, and then they're like, okay, here are all of these extra rules that you have to memorize to actually play the game. Compare this to, say, Vampire the Masquerade, where all you need to know is what's your strength, what's your melee, what's your brawl dice, and what's the number you gotta beat. How many dice do I use when I use my gun, and how many do I need to, and what's my challenge rating? What's the die number I gotta beat? Oh hey, what's my or in D&D, what's the armor class, and did I roll higher or equal to hit it? Because in 3.5 meets it beats, its armor has the priority in 5th edition. Sorry, it's just I had to explain, like this is genuinely kind of shit. It's not awful, but honestly I think this is like, for a system that's supposed to not be too complicated, this is a little much. This is a
Yeah,
little much. Oh, we didn't even get to the different stances, which again, there's other tasks in combat. You can, as in forward stances, intimidate the foe, or in open stance, you can rally your comrades. In defensive, you can protect companions. This is fucking awful.
listen, this is almost 3 hours. I want to skip to the fellowship phase.
No, I want to get to the insanity phase because holy shit,
I don't think the insanity phase is in this section.
it is now because my insanity tells me there is. But no, straight up, I low key fucking hate how combat works. By the way, some other things, some other injuries: falls, deadly falls, drowning. Then they have encounter goals. Oh my god, this is terrible. You can use riddles. You can use riddles. Uh, oh my god, this is so bad. Tolerance when the adventure. Oh my god. Yeah, let's just keep moving. I don't want to go into diplomatic because this is like the diplomatic arguments that you can do. Holy shit. Holy shit. D&D didn't need to do that. Please. Fellowship phase.
So, structure lasts from a week to one full season of game time. They make a decision, and they also get to record the growth of their characters by spending experience points and advancement
Yeah,
points.
this is downtime, basically.
You choose your destination, upkeep, spending points, undertaking. Um, yeah, I have no idea then why this is a full section.
Yeah, this is pointless. This is completely pointless. By the way, they even go particular about one adventure per year. Now, I don't know if Free League's publishing actually made this less clunky, maybe, but I have many issues with this as it is.
Okay, page 222 starts with the shadow.
By the way,
At the,
I will say that I do understand having the combat stances. I think that's a cool idea. I think if they just had combat be relatively simple and the combat stances determined like risk versus reward, I think if they just did it like that, it would have been fine. But then they went too complicated. Also, if you're wondering, during fellowship times, that's when you can heal corruption. So yeah, let's get into the glorious shadow, which is their insanity rate. Oh, this is the lore master. I don't care about that.
as I said, 222. So
Tolkien's
you
canon, subjective sources, blah blah
yeah.
blah blah blah, filling the blanks,
so
blah blah blah. Who cares?
so the shadow, so the source of corruption, experiencing distressing events, crossing or dwelling in an area tainted by the shadow, committing despicable or dishonorable deeds regardless of the end they sought to achieve, taking possession of a cursed or tainted item or treasure.
Yeah, basically they're trying to arbitrarily argue there should be a corruption and an insanity system in the game, and this actually leads to why I think the One Rings is fundamentally broken as a system. Because
I
because of
I can
this, you're eternally going to only play Free Folk of Middle Earth.
well I can see this in the sense that they're playing up the issue of the breaking of the fellowship.
The problem is that's a one-off scenario caused by literally evil in the form of the One Ring. Like, legitimately, there was an evil artifact that was constantly eating at their minds trying to get in. That doesn't fucking work, in my opinion.
Uh, well, let's see first. Senseless, your sources of anguish.
Yeah?
Natural but unexpected tragic event.
Oh no, that shit's
Uh,
genuinely traumatizing.
yep. Gruesome killing, orc work. Uh,
Orc work tends to be pretty brutal. Like,
yep.
they tend to be pretty awful.
Harrowing experience, physical or spiritual trauma or torment, sorcery, such as seeing the eye.
Which you would
That's
only do if you had a Palantir or saw it through Galadriel's mirror, but okay, go on, keep queefing.
experience directly the power of the enemy, which is interrogated by the eye or captured by the
How the
Nazgul.
fuck did you, like, you're already dead at that point. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, man. You're already dead at that point.
If you're blighted places, if you're in the
This makes
Darklands,
sense.
yeah, you have to roll the feat die 4 times and twice a day to avoid corruption.
Which I don't think is correct.
You- you-
I would say what this should do is slowly eat away at your endurance and fatigue, because the reason these lands are blighted is because this is an actual thing. Evil legitimately corrupts the land it's on. That's why when Sauron was disguised as the necromancer and spent so long in Mirkwood, it got as it did. That's why the north is cold, because that's where Melkor lived for such a long time. That's why Mordor is, let's be fair, even before Sauron lived there, it wasn't very nice. Most of it was desert except around the Sea of Nirn. But he made it worse, notably. Angmar used to be only cold, but the Witch King's time there made it preternaturally cold. The Withered Heath is as desiccated as it is because of the number of dragons that lived there. Evil does leave a mark on lands in The Lord of the Rings.
and
So,
soon you'll
in
become a vector
fairness,
of evil.
yeah, in fairness, I would say it should drain your ability. I don't think it would turn you into a giggling weird Cthulhu cultist. Because that's kind of the problem. That's kind of how they play Shadow.
Yeah. Then misdeeds. Uh, so shadow gain for a violent threat is a point, theft is 3 points, and murder is 5 points.
Yeah, murder is pretty awful.
Tainted treasure. So if you get something from the Horde of a Troll, it's 1 point. From the from the Stronghold of the Dark Lord, 1 automatic points, then gain 3 points if the test fails.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Consulate
Also,
for
if you're
Corrupt.
wondering why gold is worse than the others, this actually ties a little bit into Tolkien. Um, the Hobbit, the reason the dragon sickness and the gold plot doesn't make any sense is because they tried to implement 4 or 5 different reasons that Tolkien himself has used. Because dwarves, among anything, love things that are beautiful, and they particularly do love to work with metals, including gold. So when they see a shitload of beautiful works made out of fine materials, they tend to go a little gold sick. That's an actual thing they can go through. Gold, when it's in the large numbers that it was in the Lonely Mountain, has an evil of its own. It is technically known as the element of Melkor. It is Morgoth's element, somewhat. Small amounts of it are fine, but it has an accumulative corrupting influence the more you get. This is basically Tolkien explaining why greed is bad.
Oh, I thought that's explaining why we need to get off the gold standard.
The third explanation they give is one that Gandalf himself says in the movie and also in the book. Uh, Long has that worm brooded upon his treasure, and it will prove to be the undoing if you focus too much on it. Basically, dragons, because one of their corrupting elements is that they tend to make gold sickness worse, just because they are creatures of greed, and basically their will kind of permeates through it. It also fucking reeks. It fucking reeks. But yeah, that's why it was a shit show there, and that's why Taint and Treasure does make sense. I actually kind of understand why they went with that. They also kind of joke in the Lord of the Rings movie that the troll horde that Bilbo brought back reeked because, again, troll.
Yeah. So the consequences of corruption. So you can, I believe, reduce your shadow over time.
You usually do
But
that through downtime, yes.
yeah. So bouts of madness. So if you've been made miserable by the shadow, which would mean your hope score is less than your shadow score, and then you roll a
Hey,
Eye of
Sauron.
Sauron on the defeat die, you go insane.
Yeah, you just
You
go, like, you literally go, ha ha ha, completely kablooey, which
you either get
I low-key fucking hate.
you either become you get rage, wretchedness, desperation, or lust, which is more in the greed sense.
Yeah, I
You also get
don't like
a
this.
degeneration. You develop a negative distinct feature, such as being forgetful, uncaring, thieving, murderous, tyrannical, spiteful, and you get curses.
Yep,
Curse of vengeance, you get dragon sickness,
yeah.
resentful,
By the way,
arrogant.
these are determined by, I believe, your callings, actually.
Yep.
Like, if you pick Warden or if you pick any of them, that's basically your callings.
When you are at risk of when you get the full complement of the 4 flaws related to your shadow weakness, you are at risk of succumbing to the shadow. You
Yep,
can either do these things. If you do fall under it, you return to Valinor, or you just go mad
yeah,
and you kill yourself or starve to death. Let's go on an adventure.
yeah. They go into the different ones, and let's get to, yeah, succumbing to the shadow. You're just hopelessly lost. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they give you after that like different orcs and uh, different
I but this
enemies
is
you would
why I
encounter
intrinsically think that this game is broken, because you're essentially shutting it only to essentially the free peoples.
because if you explore the dark places, you're gonna go insane faster than a game of Call of Cthulhu.
I would argue, yeah, I think you do. Um, And the other reason I kind of have a bit of an issue with this is one of the biggest problems the One Ring has to contend with is there already was a Lord of the Rings RPG that had a long history and long running series of books called Middle Earth Roleplaying, which not only had a lot more of Middle Earth playable, it had parts of the world that you actually didn't get to go to because, well, Tolkien himself never did. They kind of had to hypothesize stuff like what's further south than Umbar? So you had a lot of that. You could play through larger sections of the Third Age. And on top of that, you could actually play orcs if you wish to, or trolls, actually. Trolls were playable.
Hmm. And
So that's, I
yeah,
think, one of my problems with this. The other is this intrinsically limits you just to the free peoples. I mean, hypothetically, you can include some of the men of the East and South that haven't fallen for Sauron. They kind of hint at that with the Dunlendings, but because they never did a Gondor, you're not going to see any good aligned Haradrim. You're not going to see any good aligned Easterlings too, which actually makes no fucking sense because they're right next to Run. Not even kidding. Like once you go down the river running far enough, you enter the Sea of Run, which is where the Easterlings live. Also, returning to Valinor, if it overpowers an elf seeking to leave Middle Earth, not all of them. Case in point, Aol the Dark Elf. He literally was a dark elf, as in dark in personality. Mechanics like this inherently make the game unsuited to long-running campaigns. That's the other problem. They want it to be a long, almost generational campaign, and then they absolutely butt fuck it by adding an insanity mechanic that's, I'd argue, crueler than Call of Cthulhu. Because, like, take a look. Let's take a look. How easy is it to just get absolutely butt fucked?
well, it depends on whatever your hope score is. And I'm taking a look at some of the sample characters. Um,
So the
and you got
shadow weakness. Oh,
you got you got
these
like
are
a
the levels.
yeah, but you got like some characters have like a hope of 10 or 17.
Oh, it takes time, but it is rapid once you do.
And do remember, you have to spend a point to use your attribute, which
Yeah.
means that the more you spend your hope points, if you are all the way down to 1 and you get a bad roll on your feet die, you're fucked.
Yep. I loathe this. I genuinely loathe this. This is my biggest problem with the book. And I just think like intrinsically their decision to add this has absolutely butt fucked the book. Because A, you basically lose anyone who's wanting to play an evil campaign. Like you lose anyone who would like to try to at least as a shitpost play like an evil, cruel, goblin band or something. You
But
lose
the,
anyone who wants to play as a member of fucking Saruman's Uruk-hai, because he was experimenting with that. You lose anyone who wants to play like Haradrim out to get vengeance for Gondor for killing their families or something.
but why would you want to play as the evil people? They're evil.
Some people like to play evil characters. It's why, funnily enough, Essence 20 had the same trouble initially when they did the Transformers RPG, since they focused really hard on the Autobots, and they did the same with the G.I. Joe one. But you know what they recognized? There are people who low-key love playing the bad guys, so they added splats for playing as Cobra or as the Decepticons in both. You can't do that in the system because the base mechanics for how insanity works actually ruins you.
Well, actually, if you're doing it as an evil character, when you're in the good lands, you actually, I guess you would get clarity and you realize I need to be a good guy.
Funnily enough, I believe there's a fan homebrew system that allows you to play orcs that does something like that.
The orc just realizes, wait a minute, I'm an elf.
That's another thing. That would have been something that Tolkien might have been willing to try, because he always was kind of concerned, like, how did orcs get the way they were? Because he never liked the idea that there was no chance for a living sapient being to actually have no free will. But no, like legitimately, that's just something that I always complain about. And any and just like even with the Fantasy Flight 40K games, they gave you Black Crusade. Like yeah, most of the games are around fighting chaos, but they also did a splat that allowed you to just be the chaos. I will warn you though, since Jim's interested in trying to play Middle Earth role playing, the game is well because it's an older RPG book. The best way to describe it is somewhat difficult to get through. Just a little bit on the hard side to get through. They do also they will there is something really neat though that Middle Earth role playing actually does have a D20 conversion kit. Funnily enough, they actually were like, okay, here's ways that you can convert us into, I believe, either D percentile or D20, which I think was pretty neat. So as for how adversaries work, they just kind of tell you straight up, here's what they do, and here are the denizens of the dark and some of their abilities they get. And I'm just gonna skip all that because fuck that. Here's
I
orcs.
yeah, I'd say just given everything we call it.
Hmm, let me look at the last chapter just to make sure we're not missing anything interesting. Because let's be fair, we do want to do that at least.
I mean, the last chapter is just the background.
Yeah, it's just the background. I basically they give details about different areas, which is important. They also give timelines, like the Tale of Years, for example. So it's basically just cool background stuff. So yeah, we'll just leave it on the orcs, which very quickly, let's just go through how they stat these out. So orcish weapons include things like bent swords or bows of horn. The damage they do is to your endurance, I believe. If I remember right, it's
Yeah.
that's your endurance damage.
Yeah.
The edge
And
is the number they need to hurt you with. Injury is 12.
yeah.
I don't know what the injury point is. Like I don't get that.
And I'm not going back to the combat setting.
I would rather boil my head than do that.
Let's see. Well, then there's different weapons. They're not weapons. Orcs. You've got great orcs.
These are basically the leaders of the orcs. They're usually the most powerful among them. The Great Goblin
Yep.
was an example, Gulfin Bull was another, and Azog was another.
The Mordor orcs.
They're very common. There's also different types like messengers of the Black Tower. Lugburs
And
is the term for
yep.
Black Tower,
And the orcs of the Misty Mountains.
which are
The
which are smaller but more numerous.
Yep. And then you have the spiders of Mirkwood.
Oh, by the way, a fun sidetrack: the orcs of Mount Graham fucking hate hobbits a lot. They really fucking hate hobbits,
Fucking hobbits.
which I think is cute. I forget what hate means, and I don't care enough to look back, but it just gives you some basic stat loadouts for them.
I believe hate meant sort of like aggressiveness.
I think it's either that or it's their equivalent of virtue.
And then you have the and then besides the spiders, you have the trolls. You got your cave trolls and your
There's a
hill
bunch of
trolls.
spiders, by the way. Here they are. And then there's the
Yep.
trolls.
Mountain trolls and stone trolls, and then wolves.
Because
They even have
wolves
their
are
own.
intelligent and
They
rather
even have
cruel.
they even have their own weapons,
Yep.
just biting and rending.
Yep.
And then werewolves,
They're still a thing.
the Hound of Sauron, and vampires, which are just bats,
They're large bats, yeah.
and the Secret Shadows.
But yeah, Hound of Sauron is allegedly still around, even though I believe he was killed by Huan, actually. Huan being one of the great hounds of the hunter.
And that is it.
Yep, that's it. I don't know. I guess they had the rights to vampires, even though those are also not a thing in this time period. They're basically the large bats that they use to block themselves from the sun. From
And
this point are campaigns, and I think we can just cut that because
and
it's
I think
late.
we did give our conclusion. Again, it's way too complex for what it's trying to do, and it discourages long-term play.
Um, basically biggest problems that I always had with this book. There's three major problems I had with this book. The first is that they never expanded beyond Rovanion, other than a brief trip to Rohan and a little bit into Arnor. Which, hey, that's fine, but this is comparing it. But the problem is there was an RPG that came out that covered more than that decades ago. That makes it come off like a downgrade. Problem two is that the insanity system absolutely ruins any chance of doing a long form campaign. And problem three, the efforts to go full bit by bit detail on how journeying and combat works ruins the possibility of this being simple. The game system itself is really simple. It's just you roll a d12 to that's your random luck factor, and then the number of d6s determine your actual skill, the more reliable asset. The problem is that in combat, you have to determine your combat stance. Fair enough. You then have to determine your protection value if you get hit hard enough. You have to memorize your weapon's edge factor, which is if you go over that with your feat die, you can potentially do a piercing blow, which automatically wounds and or kills a target. You have to keep a track your endurance points. That's your hit points. And then last but not least, like I said, the insanity factor ruins it. It basically you can't do long campaigns with it. It very rapidly sanity spirals. Like you only need to fail 4 times before you just become unplayable. It's like playing a Call of Cthulhu character with a person whose power stat is under 30. Like that character ain't going to last too long.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
in conclusion, the basic concept of the system I like. The expansions they put onto it are much to its detriment. And I feel like they why the fuck didn't you actually get the rights to Gondor while you had the chance? What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, was that an issue even before Christopher Tolkien died? I don't think it was. Not really.
I don't know.
I just think they decided to faff around too much and it fucked them. Because
Listen,
one of the
listen.
things they did was,
There's
uh-huh.
there's even a worse power than Sauron or Melkor. It is the copyright system of the United States of America.
Oh god, yeah, it's a travesty. There's also another problem. The Hobbit card game they introduced, where you had to use cards for your stupid RPG. What do you think's worse, that or actually calculating the journey and then setting up for the random hazard rolls that you had to do?
Cards, because you have to keep track of those cards, and if you're missing any of them,
Well, no, fuck you.
yeah.
Do you want to know why? They're not made anymore.
Oh, so you can't even play it.
Nope. Free Leagues Publishing also never used them again. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering, I don't know how much Free Leagues Publishing actually fixed up second edition. Basically, I was really burned out by first edition being designed the way it was, so I never got my hands on what they did. I do know that they did basically a republish of all of the stuff that was made by Cubicle 7. Essentially, because their first expansion pack was basically just a retread of what they did, Arnor and Rivendell. The second one, though, which is smarter, Free Leagues Publishing got the rights to Moria and did an adventure hook around that entire area. I don't know how good that one is, though.
But
Also, again, some other complaints that I can fling. Um, the only kind of ambiguously good free peoples that you can play are the Dunlendings, like with all of the expansions. And that only happened because they added Rohan. At no point did they think about adding anything from Ruin, even though I imagine those rights are dirt cheap. I don't know if they'd be cheaper than Mordor, but you could totally do that. And it would make sense because Dale is legitimately one river ride down to its sea.
Yeah,
It
but
would.
in this game, a river ride is going to be multiple rolls.
Oh God, yeah. Oh, and if you're poor or frugal, good luck, pal. Good luck, pal. You're not getting on that boat.
So yeah, not probably Free League did it better, but we're dealing with this one for tonight. So
I would say because of how complex the combat system and the journey system is, I can't I cannot give this higher than a low playable. If it didn't have that, I would rate it at decent, even though I really don't like this book. I genuinely don't like this book, but I'd still rate it at decent. But then, like I said, the combat, so it can't be higher than playable. That's kind of my thoughts on it. Would you rate
so
it worse or better than that?
I would rate it the same. It I feel like again, if you want to play it, because you can play it short term, but since you can't play it long term, there's really no sense of getting invested in a character or realistically in a journey.
Yeah. And again, like I said, I would just say that it had competition already. Middle Earth role playing game has been around since the 1990s, essentially. I think 80s actually, and it just does everything that this book does, but better. I mean, not necessarily. Let me tell you. I'll actually leave off this stream by talking about one of the most cringe aspects of Middle Earth role playing. So they actually do stat out all 9 of the Nazgul in their Mordor book, right?
Oh no.
So they actually give origins and backstories for all of them. And one of them, this is actually one of the better ones, but just as a little bit of a nod, they actually already made one of the Nazgul a woman. Her name is Adunafel the Silent, and she's actually one of the better ones, so I have no issues with her. Instead, I'm going to shit all over their backstory for Kamul. So Kamul, he's known as the Black Easterling, right?
Yeah,
He has blood of Numenor.
but he's an
He is of the
Easterling.
East, but he's a Numenorian, basically.
I was a man of the West, but now I'm a man of the East
No, it gets even more cringe than that. So, besides that, do you want to know why he turned evil?
because he felt like it.
He wanted to fuck his mommy. Basically,
Incest in Lord of the Rings.
his father married. His father married an Avari, one of the elves who refused the journey west towards Valinor. Like he is not from her. She's actually a stepmom, but he wanted to pork her. But it turns out his stepmom, because she's a dark elf, that means evil, which means she's an agent of Sauron, and she honeypots him into taking one of the rings.
Yeah, I get one of the rings. Wait, I'm invisible. My dick can't work anymore.
And that is the tale of Kamul the Easterling in Middle Earth role playing. Is it as amazing as you think it is?
Honestly, I'm thinking we should probably review that. Whatever the entry is that details evil, if it's that insane, we're gonna have a fun time.
All right, so it won't be the next book we cover, that's for sure. But next Lord of the Rings dive we're gonna go into the fan fiction take of the 9 kings who are doomed to die.
With that, hope everyone has a good night. We got Discord where we can chat about
Also, feel
bunch of
free,
stuff.
you can get a copy of the RPG that we covered, second edition, from the Free League's publishing website, which is also in the description. I There is enough in the system that if you thought it was interesting, I can totally understand. The system is pretty simple, other than the combat and the journeys, but the base system actually is pretty good. I
Uh,
do like it. You have your D12 and then the D6 pool to represent your skills. I like that. I think that's pretty good. It's just everything else.
with that, have a good night, everyone.
Have an excellent night, everyone.